What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Notre Dame, Indiana. Well, this is the inaugural version of our call-in show here for the playoff game between my Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Jeffrey's Indiana Hoosiers. We're just so excited about this game, and we wanted you guys, the fans, to hop in and have your say. Jeffrey, what were you thinking after the Northern Illinois game? And like, no one knew quite how good Indiana is. No one thought this would be the matchup, and it's fun for the state of Indiana, and it's fun for college basketball to have this in-state rivalry back on the big stage.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's hilarious that some people on social media, which people on social media, they're gonna say whatever they want, some of the most ridiculous things. It's all good, but like they were saying that Notre Dame Indiana was the worst matchup. I'm like, okay. I mean, I would argue Clemson Texas could be worse. We know the brands, we know what they like Clemson's done, but like realistically, I think there's a better chance that game's a blowout than this game, or even SMU Penn State could be a bigger blowout than this game. Now, that doesn't mean that this game won't be a bigger blowout, whoever wins, but I don't think this is going to be the worst of the four games. And with the in-state rivalry being a thing too, I think this game could end up being the best of the four games. I really just disagree. Again, maybe it's my bias a little bit, but I don't agree with that. But I do like when you said about this game, no one thought that it would be in the beginning of the season, especially after Notre Dame lost, and no one thought Indiana was going to be here. Yeah, it's crazy because I mean, I laughed so hard when Notre Dame lost that game against Northern Illinois, and fans were saying that Notre Dame's done. They're not getting in. I've said this multiple times. I was like, no, Notre Dame, if they win out the rest of the way, they're still getting in the college football playoff. Enough chaos is going to happen that an 11-1 Notre Dame with that A&M win, even with that surprise upset loss, they're still getting in the playoff. And what do you know? They got into the playoff. So it just cracks me up. People were really debating that. I don't understand that. I mean, Notre Dame was going to get in. People didn't think they were going to win out. But, I mean, realistically, we knew that Northern Illinois game was a fluke. It was a fluke. They rebounded from it and played great down the stretch of the season. And Indiana, I mean, they just kept winning. And, yeah, the schedule helped, but they just kept winning. And a loss against, at the time, the number 2 team in the country on the road in their house is just not enough to leave them out. So here we are. It was unlikely, but now we got a great match between Indiana and Notre Dame coming up. And even though a lot of people think it's going to be a blowout in the favor of the Irish, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a close game either way. But can't wait to talk about more of the matchup as we get into it.
Yeah, and this game is on College Game Day. Like, this is the game day game of the weekend.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure they're
big.
gonna. How many Hoosier fans do you think will make the trip? Like, I know a lot of Notre Dame fans bought the ticket before the selection show because they knew that they were hoping that the Irish would have the first round playoff game. How many do you think will make it? Because it's not a far drive, but the tickets are just expensive.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, because I do think that if the tickets were cheaper, that there would be more Indiana fans there, and because of the proximity. But I mean, wow, it is unbelievable how expensive some of those tickets are, and the fact that for an Indiana game, that prices are being demanded this high, that shows you how far Kurt Signetti has taken Indiana in 1 year. That alone, I mean, going into Indiana games used to be cheap, even for the road team, because of the fact like no one cared. Like, oh, well, we're playing Indiana.
Yeah, just
This
like
is
Maryland.
impressive. Yeah, I mean, I know this is a playoff game, and I know like Notre Dame is a brand team, but I mean, we're seeing $1,000 tickets. So
yeah, it's just like the Ohio
it's
State
crazy.
game. So we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from the fans. So feel free to Jeffrey can drop the StreamYard link and then.
Oh, absolutely, definitely can do that. Definitely want to hear y'all's takes and opinions on this game. But I will say though, to directly answer your question, I do believe that it's only going to be a couple thousand, probably. Maybe at max like 5,000. they're jazzed up. Indiana fans are really hyped, but this is not. They're not. Notre Dame fans are not going to give away a lot of those for one, and two, they're just too expensive. Because I've seen people online say the 12 Indiana fans in existence. Well, that's definitely not true. Indiana does not have 12 football fans. If they only had 12, then they wouldn't have been selling out a 53,000, stadium, at Memorial Stadium like that. That's not happening.
The one data point that we have with both teams was that Purdue game, and Purdue, the other Indiana team, not a good season, but both teams put up a lot of points. Of course, Notre Dame sat their starters at halftime, so it was all the backup to the second half.
Yeah, Indiana had to keep the starters in to blow Purdue out to make a statement, and that's what Cignetti did. Like, he knew that if they barely beat Purdue, then people were going to try to justify that they didn't belong. We got a couple callers on the line. The first one that popped through, we got Hollywood Caden, otherwise known as Caden the Man. He's been on before with me and Jackson. Definitely want to hear his takes. Appreciate you for coming on, Caden.
Oh my gosh, how long has it been?
Well, it's been a while since we have talked for sure, absolutely. And I remember that when you called into the Alabama show, it was a great conversation then. So can't wait to hear your takes.
Well, let me just say this first, Jeffrey. Finally, Caden the Man has come back to the OCFB.
Who's your team, Caden?
Jeffrey, I think I'll let you do the honors of saying my team just for your buddy that's in the top right corner of me. I think I've probably said it before, but Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah, you did say it before. I'm trying to remember. What did you say? I remember. Yeah.
Listen, we're the team that beat Indiana and also beat Notre Dame.
Okay, Ohio State. Yep. I couldn't remember. I was like, Ohio State. Yep. That's all right.
Well, if you like to, I would love to explain where I've been for a while, but it would probably take me about, I don't know, 2 hours. But I don't think you guys would want to hear about a trip to Europe that I did last month.
That's cool.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
Just went on a lot of trips to like soccer clubs up in Europe and went to PSG, met a lot of cool people. But I'll explain that on another day, another call and show. But Indiana versus Notre Dame, two top powerhouses of college football. Wow. I thought I'd never see this matchup in
Notre Dame
lifetime.
Historically is a powerhouse. Indiana is not at all. But, recently, still the same for Indiana. They're not. And Notre Dame hasn't been what they were. But, they're still relevant every year. But I know what you mean. Like, this game was unlikely. But I still, people are trashing Notre Dame too hard, I still think. Like, Notre Dame is still a massive program. They just don't have the appeal they used to. But they're not like Nebraska. They're not Nebraska. But I know what you mean.
I agree with your point there, Jeffrey. And Ohio State has 33 wins over Notre Dame for the last 20 years. So I'd like to point that out to your Notre Dame buddies' knowledge.
33. I don't know what you're saying, man. But okay.
33 years in a row. I think it is 33 years or 30. We have the most wins over you in the last, 10, 15, 20 years?
I
think
Ohio
it is
State's
20 years.
We haven't played
programs in college football.
That's
Notre Dame has fallen off, but Notre Dame's still good. Still a good program. They're just not on Ohio State's level recently.
But
so, Kaden, what do you think of the game?
And that's what I was actually going to get to, Will, if you would sit down and just relax. Notre Dame, Indiana. I'd say this is going to be a good game with a lot of close, but it's going to be close scoring. But I think Nady Kurtz-Sagney might take the Hoosiers to their first, actual playoff bowl game. that might give them a challenge. Because Notre Dame is a good team, but in my opinion, I want to see Indiana like get challenged, by like SMU, Clemson. I mean Georgia. Give them somebody that actually has a serious roster. That has a roster that has, the talent level of like, SMU, Penn State.
How is SMU more talented than Indiana? I mean, realistically,
I'm saying SMU is more talented than Notre Dame.
No, that's no. SMU is not more talented than Notre Dame. Penn State, maybe, not SMU.
Listen, I've said, listen, I've got SMU on the upset to beat Penn State because I feel like SMU is one of those, and I don't mean to cut it off here, but SMU is one of those dark horses like Syracuse, like Miami, Pitt, the dark horses of the ACC. So you don't know if they'll come out there and absolutely just tear the house down. So you never know. Crazier things have happened.
Well, I mean, if SMU beats Penn State, it doesn't mean that they're more talented than Penn State, though. I mean, that's not true. If SMU wins the game, yeah, it's because they upset them. It was a surprise win, but they're not better than Penn State as a team.
But the truth be told, I've got Indiana winning over Notre Dame because I hate Notre Dame's guts, and Notre Dame, to me, just don't like them. Don't like them Irish.
So so that's your reasoning of picking Indiana. Like you don't like Notre Dame, so Indiana's gonna win. So like you just think Notre Dame's just not good enough. I mean, the thing, like, Notre Dame's a better team than Indiana, but
Indiana's better than right now. Listen, right now Indiana's better than Notre Dame. Notre Dame, however, is overrated in my opinion.
Well, we'll see on the field, Matt. We'll see on the field.
I think Willis just say he wants Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the playoffs, which if they do, why don't y'all come up? Well, we'll see y'all in the playoffs maybe if y'all can get past Indiana. But if you do get past Indiana, then we'll really see whose teams are going to be the last one trash talking.
Well, I mean, the thing is it's kind of like with Clemson and Alabama are playing every year. I don't really think people want to see a Notre Dame Ohio State game in the playoff. Like I like the new matchups, kind of like Indiana Notre Dame. That's a game that hasn't been played in forever, since '91. It's cool to see it again. And you're seeing an SMU Penn State. You're seeing games you wouldn't normally see. I mean, I get with your ties to Ohio State that you would love to see them play Notre Dame again and win again, presumably, but I don't think most of America would want to see that again. That game, even no matter who won. Personally, I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I mean, I'm an Alabama fan as well. Like we've talked about this before because you've come on the Bama show, and I was getting sick of Bama Clemson every year for a while. I was getting old, and even in Bama Georgia, it's just like no, you don't want to see these games 3 times.
You'd rather see Alabama versus like somebody like Penn State or Alabama versus SMU or somebody like
different games
to like TCU.
Not necessarily worse teams. Like it could be Bama Ohio State. It could be Bama versus Clemson. Clemson again now wouldn't be as bad as it was back 5 years ago when it was happening every year. It could be Miami. It could be
Pitt.
I mean, it doesn't matter. You just want different matchups. I mean, you're gonna have like redos. Like you're gonna have, like Michigan, Ohio State could play multiple times in the same season. I mean, stuff like that. But you just don't want to keep seeing the same game. I think the thing that makes the playoff more interesting is that you're seeing different matchups. I mean, you're going to see teams matched up against Boise and Arizona State. They wouldn't normally play each other. Now, hopefully those games are good because a lot of people think they'll be blowouts, but only time will tell. But
can I talk about Joseph's comment?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, Joseph, we did struggle with Mayava's running ability and generating a pass rush. But what makes me feel better about this game is that Howard Cross will be back, and he was injured for the USC game. And he was the best he's been the Irish's best defensive lineman at least the last 2 seasons. You could say the third because Isaiah Foskey didn't play that well his last season. So definitely feeling better about the pass rush because Rourke's just not as mobile as Mayava, and Howard Frost will be back. And we'll be playing against the Hoosiers. So, yeah, like, I understand why you do feel a little worried, but I do feel like the pass rush will be better this season, this game against Indiana than it was against the Trojans in LA.
And I would like to point out, I would love to see Ohio State versus Georgia again in the playoffs because they owe us one.
Well, I mean, the thing is that the funny thing about if that game happened, both teams are worse than the year that they played. So it's going to be interesting to see what would happen. Like Georgia's worse this year than they were that year, and Ohio State's worse this year than they were that year. So
I wouldn't say we're worse than what we were. I just say, and this is my opinion, and people can call me out for this, but I say we still need a little bit of improvement. Not like a little offensively, but I feel like defensively we've got it. It's just we need to, and I probably can't speak for Georgia fans, but I feel like Ohio State fans would understand this. Like we need to end the game early. We need to end it off early. As soon as that second quarter hits, we need to start coming in, hitting hard, and we need to start making those big plays like forced fumbles, interceptions, more turnovers. We cannot allow the offense to be scoring more offensive points on our defense. We cannot be allowing the most rushing yards against the defense. No more passing yards against our defense. And I feel like Georgia needs to bring that up too in their locker room, because if they don't, that's going to be some really bad problems, and that could cause us huge problems, especially if we've got a big game, especially like Tennessee. We've got to bring it on defense. So as far as the OSU Tennessee games, if you're asking, yeah, I'm going to make sure I talk to some of the guys at Ohio State to make sure that they get that through their head, that they make sure, like, hey, we need to end Tennessee early. Like, we cannot be letting them score in the end zone for 3 quarters. We need to shut them down for 3 quarters.
That's definitely how most teams can have success, is if you shut the other team down. If you prevent them from scoring, then you win. I mean, like Notre Dame put up 49 on USC in the final week of the regular season, but they gave up 35. Doesn't look good on paper. It's better to, win 24-3. It's something like that, because you shut the other team down. So, yeah, I mean, if any of these teams do that, if Ohio State does against Tennessee, if Notre Dame does against Indiana, you shut the other team down for a majority of the game, you're most likely going to win. It's going to be interesting, though. I can't wait for the games. I think Indiana Notre Dame might be the best game, but if it's not Indiana Notre Dame in the first round, then it's probably that Ohio State Tennessee game. Both games are going to be really good.
And I can agree with you. And like I said, Ohio State in that game against Tennessee at home, I know it's at home, but we still need to bring it 100%. We cannot be allowing Nico to be throwing that ball. Georgia made that mistake on defense that they let him throw the ball for 2 quarters. We cannot be letting him throw the ball for 3 quarters, not even 2 quarters. We need to end him off early and the running game off early, and we need to give Josh Heupel and them a few problems, because now I will say, if you're talking about blowouts, I'm expecting that game to be Ohio State, Tennessee, like 35-3 or like something like that. But that's the thing we need to do. And especially, with Indiana and Notre Dame, I feel like that's going to be a close game, but it's like, maybe Indiana's got an edge over Notre Dame, or Notre Dame's got an edge over Indiana. I don't know. We'll have to see about that as far as it's concerned. Mm-hmm. Oh, and Spaz is in here. Hey, could you bring in Spaz? Spaz.
Okay. I don't want to clutter.
We can bring him in for a second, but
I don't want to clutter the call-in show.
Jeez,
yeah.
But
we gotta duck loose in the building. Damn it!
I can only be here for a few minutes anyway, so I just wanted to.
No problem.
I just wanted to come in and say, hey, what's up, Caden?
Appreciate you for coming on, Spaz.
Great season for your Ducks, Spaz.
Thanks, Wendy. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I'm an East Coaster, and I got to get up at 7:15 for work, but I appreciate what you guys do on your show.
Yeah, it's tough being on the East Coast, man. Like I want to come on after dark more like I was earlier in the season, but it's just hard.
I know we haven't seen our teenager Jeffrey in like weeks.
Yeah, I know. I almost came on the other night, but I've been pretty tired, so like Will, just trying to get sleep. But I'll be back on soon. It's always a blast talking, man.
Well, hey. All I got to say is this has got to be a fun weekend. Well, fun couple of weeks for you and Wendy. You guys get to go back and forth at each other. You representing the Indiana channel there, Jeffrey, and Wendy, of course, the big Notre Dame alum. So that's got to be fun for you guys. Kind of a dream come true matchup.
Absolutely, Spaz. It's awesome. I'm really excited about it. Will's excited about it. Appreciate the shout out, Spaz, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun game.
As far as you're concerned,
worry about Tennessee first.
As far as you're concerned, Spaz, we don't need to be worrying about Tennessee. I'm gonna see the guys later this week, so you don't need to worry about them. As far as you're concerned, you Ducks need to get ready to rumble because you've got some big problems coming up your way. And I'm gonna tell you what, you thought Autzen was gonna be bad? Just wait till the playoffs, then you're really gonna feel the pain.
Yeah, well, you got to come to the Rose Bowl first, so that's
the Rose Bowl
challenge.
The Rose Bowl. Sir. Ohio State was born in the Rose Bowl. Like, come on. Come on. The Rose Bowl's our home. We won the most Rose Bowls. Come on. I mean, we beat USC in the Rose Bowl more many times. And Tim and what's that guy's name? What's that other guy's name? What's that other guy's
Tim
name?
Tim and Matt.
Yeah. Matt and Tim, I'll tell you what, if I had $1 for every time Tim and Matt got upset at me about me calling in, oh my gosh. I'm telling you what, the jealousy rating is really off the charts since we beat their butt too many times. But as far as I'm concerned, Spaz, I'll just tell you what, do me a favor, tell your Ducks, including Dylan and Gabriel, to be prepared because they better lock up their straps tight, tie their cleats up tight, because it's going to be one physical game if they got to play either us or Georgia. Either one, we're going to come in and beat y'all.
We'll just go over the top like we did on the last time. We'll take Stewart over the top just like we did the whole game. Only this time we won't have a spitter, so we'll have both sides. We'll be going over the top on both of your secondary guys back there.
Oh, shut it, Spaz. You ain't going to be running no ball against this defense because I'm assuring you, when I get in that locker room this week, I'm going to tell you what, it is not going to be pretty. And I assure you what, oh, don't worry, Oregon's going to be the first conversation we're going to be having in that locker room. Trust me.
All right. Well, hey, guys, I got to run. I got to do our show here.
Oh, no, there goes the duck. The duck is running away like a coward as always. I'm not impressed.
I appreciate you for coming on, Spaz. It's always great talking to you, man, and good luck to the Ducks. Hopefully they do well. They've had a fantastic season. And outside the Wisconsin game, have been dominant, and Ohio State, but that's expected. They've been dominant all year. Very impressive.
Train keeps it rolling right on down the track.
Excited to see.
The only thing rolling down the track will be us beating y'all in the Rose Bowl.
We'll see, Caden.
Have a good night, Spaz. Appreciate you for coming on.
Have a good night, guys.
All right, Jeffrey, let's move on to the next caller.
Appreciate you for coming on, Caden. Made a lot of solid points about, Indiana and Notre Dame and stuff like that. Appreciate you for coming on.
It's my pleasure, gentlemen, and it's good hearing from y'all. And if you smell what Caden is cooking. Later, boys.
Later.
Have a good night, Caden. Now we got our good buddy Jackson coming on the show. Appreciate you for stopping by, Jackson.
Oh, thanks for having me on, gents. How y'all doing tonight?
Doing good, buddy. What do you think of our game?
I think it's pretty cool seeing a Notre Dame home game not being on NBC for the first time since November 17th, 1990. That's like, it's just like, I don't even, it just feels so surreal. It's like not seeing Ohio State, Michigan on ABC for the first time in your life, like in 2017. That's what it kind of feels like to me.
Yeah, I do think it's so ironic about that. Like I talked about with Bark the other night about the whole NBC thing where Notre Dame and Indiana back in '91 playing on NBC was like their first game or whatever on there. And then now it's like their first home game on ABC since the 80s playing against Indiana. It is ironic. I mean, you wouldn't expect that to happen, but, you know, wild coincidences do occur. And that is definitely a wild coincidence.
Yeah, my dad was at that game, and Al Golden got the game-winning touchdown for Penn State, and he's the D coordinator at Notre Dame now, which is funny. Yeah, so full circle moment.
Oh man.
So Jackson, like looking at the Indiana Notre Dame matchup in both teams, I mean, what do you think are like the key, keys to the game, key matchups? Like what are you seeing from both teams, and like what would determine a win or a loss for either
I think
team?
Notre Dame is just gonna have to keep doing what they've been doing since that loss to Northern Illinois, not to mend the reality. Just keep winning, and I think Indiana's gonna have to make sure they don't have a bunch of turnovers. They're gonna have to make some magic. And one of the storylines is, can Notre Dame win the big game in the postseason for the first time since 1993?
I mean, technically, Jackson's not wrong. I mean, that's why there are probably some people that are backing Indiana. That's why, even though people are, laughing at some of, Caden the man's outrageous takes is in their opinion. I mean, he is in a way, he makes a point about, I guess, Notre Dame being overrated. Now, are they overrated this year? I don't think they're overrated this year. But Notre Dame's been overrated in the past because they've been hyped up a lot, and then they fall apart. They choke. I mean, that's why we make fun of Miami. That's why we make fun of Texas A&M, because they're always overranked, and then they suck. Notre Dame's never really been that bad, but they've had a lot of seasons, even since I've been watching football, where they've been hyped, and then they playing in the big game at the end of the season, and then they just get blasted off the field. The difference, though, this is not a game like Notre Dame's going up against Georgia right now. They're going up against Indiana. And Indiana is the underdog. Yes, this is a big game, but this is a game Notre Dame is supposed to win. If Notre Dame loses this game, I don't think it's them losing the big game like they've always lost. I just think they just lost, it's like Penn State going down to Indiana. It's an upset loss instead of them going down to Ohio State and in previous years Michigan every single season and going 10-2 basically. They just can't win those big games against those big teams. But I don't look at Indiana in the same ballpark, even though I'm a fan of Indiana. I don't. I mean, they're having a remarkable year, but if we see Indiana do this in years to come, and they're consistent and they're winning 9, 10, 11 games year in and year out for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years under Cignetti, then I'll think like, oh, when Indiana's playing a team like Notre Dame, that hey, this is a big matchup between two really, really great programs and great teams. But it's just kind of hard to say that when you're talking about an Indiana team that before this season was nothing. This is a 1-year deal. If Indiana beats Notre Dame, it's a upset loss. It's not Notre Dame choking again in the big game. I don't look at it that way. Now, again, some people would, but I don't look at it that way.
Yeah, it's just funny that the captain of the '93 team, Bryant Young, his son Bryce is on this team, and he's, as a freshman defensive lineman, has had a great year on special teams, blocking punts, which could be a factor in this game. But of course, Indiana had their struggles on special teams against Ohio State. We'll see if that happens again. But this is
I
like
will
kind of
say
this
that
could be a
Notre Dame's
full circle
atmosphere
moment.
Notre Dame's atmosphere won't be as crazy as that Ohio State atmosphere, most
Well,
likely.
I mean, it's a night game though. I mean, Notre
That's
Dame
true.
fans,
I will give it that. That's
yeah.
true.
Notre Dame fans at night, the
Yeah.
wine and cheesers don't come out at night. They only come out during the day. So
It's true. I
yeah.
will give Notre Dame that, absolutely. But
Yeah.
that Ohio State atmosphere, I mean, Ohio State sometimes has a not somewhat overrated of an atmosphere. Some of their games are not great. We talked about that before, but when they played Indiana, oh my gosh, like watching that game on the TV, the fans were it was just ridiculous. Like you couldn't hear anything. I mean, literally, Indiana's offensive linemen said they couldn't hear anything all game. They couldn't hear nothing. So I just don't think that the Notre Dame atmosphere is going to be that bad. It's going to be hard. I'm not saying, but I think it's going to be closer to what Indiana faced against Michigan State than Ohio State. I think it's somewhere in between. Michigan State is a pretty decent atmosphere that was actually pretty loud at the beginning of the game, and then once Indiana blew the doors off of them, they shut down and walked away and left at halftime. But this is the first season I've ever seen Indiana do that to anybody, which was amazing. But Ohio State was crazy.
Responding to Troy's comment, I mean, I think it's the sons of the wine and cheesers that drink all day and are like passionate and are like yell all day. I mean, that's kind of, so you're kind of right, Troy. I think it's a lot of it's the sons of the wine and cheesers.
Honestly, I just think it's insane that you go to a football game and you're not going to be loud. Like you're gonna like oh, you can't stand up, like when you first explained this phenomenon to me, Will, because I mean, the thing is, the more I think about it, I think I'd seen it before online, but it never really I never thought about it. I was just like, what? And then like you went into the full breakdown. You gave me the scoop, and I was just sitting there like mouth agape, like what am I hearing right now? I mean, this is a travesty to college football to have that. Like go to a game and be loud. You know what I'm saying? Be loud. Show up. You know, I just no. You cannot go to a game and be quiet.
It's like good grief. Oh man, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Notre Dame Indiana matchup. Like, I would like to see Notre Dame win this one. No offense to Indiana, but it's like I just want to, because if they win against Indiana, a huge thing will be carried off of Marcus Freeman's back, and it's going to show everybody, you know, Marcus Freeman can do what Brian Kelly couldn't.
Brian Kelly and Charlie Weiss, Ty Willingham, Davey, none of them can win the big
This
game.
is a big game for both programs because, if Notre Dame wins, it does make Freeman look better. It makes Notre Dame look better unless they get blown out in the next game. I don't see that happening, but that would be the only way that would kind of negate a win over Indiana. But then you look at it on the Indiana side, and a win over Notre Dame would make people actually be like, okay, Indiana wasn't a fluke. Because there's still people saying this is a fluke. I don't really see how you could see it's a fluke. I mean, looking at Indiana's season, where is it a fluke? There's no fluke. They blew out trashy teams better than anyone else did, and then barely beat Michigan, who ended up being a whole lot better than they looked at the beginning of the season. I mean, when Michigan beat USC or whatever earlier in the year and all that, you know, and Texas blew them out, right? Like, Michigan was garbage, absolute garbage at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the season, whole lot better. I mean, that they beat Ohio State. They almost beat Indiana. That's not the same team that sucked at the beginning of the year. It's just not the same team. I understand you can say effort. Oh, it's the
they
game.
Still don't have a quarterback though.
But they didn't have a quarterback. That I know that. But Michigan's team is in the top 25 as a whole for talent, and they finally figured out how to make it work with no QB. They made it work.
And, you know, you talked a lot about perspective in one of the Alabama call-in shows, Jeffrey. Like, for example, Indiana UCLA earlier in the year. Nobody gave that any thought. It was like, UCLA sucks. Michigan USC. Oh my God, great game. 2 weeks before them, BYU SMU. SMU doesn't belong in the ACC. Months later, things change. Things change real quick.
I'm just saying, like Indiana, if they beat Michigan 20-15 in week 4 of the season, then that looks worse. But I'm just saying, like, the only reason people are trashing Indiana is because they're not a brand. That's just the way the media works. You got to beat down the little guy. That's just the way it works. If you're a big brand team, big bad wolf, whatever, analogy you want to use, then you all good, man. But you got to blow that little house down.
You won't hear me complain about
it's going to take years for Indiana to be able to change the narrative. This game won't even completely change the narrative. It's the same thing with TCU. Like you had the 1 year, you even got the win. You beat Michigan, and TCU's legit, and then they got blown out by Georgia, and they've never been heard from again. They had an okay year this year, but you know what I mean though. Like no one cares. Like, and if Indiana does the same thing, then people are just going to say this year was a fluke. You know what I'm saying? So this game doesn't even completely change the narrative. It just kind of makes some people say, well, Indiana beat Notre Dame. That's a good win. It kind of shows that they weren't trash. They're not trash, but that's just what some people are going to say regardless. But, yeah, I mean, Indiana's going to have to win like this for years, to change the narrative. And with Notre Dame, again, beating Indiana is not going to completely help Freeman. It's just going to help him somewhat. And if he continues to do this in the future and next year makes the playoff again and wins another big game, then you're going to start having people treat him differently. Like all people want from a James Franklin is that one win. Can you just give me that one win, man? Can you do that? Can you get that one win? And every time in that game, he loses. And if Freeman does the same thing, he'll just join the group. You can't do that. You have to be – and Ron Day's starting to get it now. Ron Day's starting, but he's added to the list now because he can't win the one game against Michigan. But that's what happens. I mean, remember Harbaugh? He couldn't beat Ohio State. Oh, he couldn't beat Ohio State. He couldn't beat Ohio State. He couldn't beat Ohio State. He's going to get fired. Then he beats Ohio State. Then he wins a championship. Now he's doing great at the Chargers. He's a great coach. He's one of the best coaches in this. Remember when people said he should have been fired and then he sucked and he was trash when he lost to Indiana and he couldn't beat? Okay, yeah. So, yeah, that perception, like you said, like what I said, and yeah, you have to do it consistently year after year after year. It's not just one game. One game's not going to completely change narratives.
It's like I don't ever really like to base things off of 1 week. I like to base off 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. You can't base it off of one bad day because that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's just things you don't do. And, like we all hope for Marcus Freeman to win that big game or James Franklin to win that big game, Jim Harbaugh to win that big game. It's like hoping for Tom to finally get Jerry. On like those
or Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner.
Exactly. Like, where like hoping for Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame win that big game. It's kind of like that Tom and Jerry cartoon where like Tom is trying to get that $1 million, Jerry's kind of being an ass to him, but then he's like, gee, I'm throwing away $1 million, but I'm happy.
I love that one, man. That is one of my favorite Tom and Jerry episodes, man. I'm throwing away $1 million, but I'm happy. It's so great. It's so great. Like, I love how people say, like, Tom and Jerry shouldn't talk. Like, they shouldn't have any words.
You got no complaints.
You remember that one movie where they talked in the whole movie, right?
The 92
it's like,
movie.
In the cartoon, though, the old episode, they did talk.
Yep.
Sometimes, but it was done for comedic effect. I look at it the same way as like SpongeBob now with the new episodes where the faces are wacky all the time. And it's like in the old seasons, iconic wacky faces, but the difference is they knew when to use them for comedic effect. They didn't do them all the time. They didn't overuse them. They knew when to use them. And that's with Tom and Jerry. They knew when to have them talk. Those iconic lines, man. I love it. But yeah.
So there we go.
That's me going off on my cartoon tangent. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. But if Notre Dame does lose to Indiana at home, it'll be the first time in quite a while that it's happened.
Can we talk about some of Troy and Joe's comments?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So this Troy V one, I mean, this is where I think the game will be won. If Notre Dame's offensive line, which it's kind of been a ragtag team of like young guys and castaway guys, if they can control the line against Indiana, which Indiana has the best run defense in the country, I think, statistically. But if Notre Dame can make some holes for Jeremiah Love, then he's as good as anyone at breaking tackles. I think that could be where Notre Dame could maybe extend the lead a bit. But if IU can control the line and limit the big runs, I think that's where that gives Curtis Rourke a chance to win IU the game. Do you agree?
The thing that people don't understand about that Ohio State game is that Ohio State's offense did not beat Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
They did not beat Indiana at all. Judkins and Travion Henderson ran for nothing, like at all. Didn't do jack in the game. Indiana outgained them on the ground big in that game. And then you talk about the fact that a kick return for a touchdown, that there was a clear hold. It was a very clear hold on Ohio State. Didn't call it. Even
they don't call many holds. They don't call many holds in the Big Ten. That's
so touchdown Ohio State on that. Then the muff punt. That's just dumb. That's stupid. It should not happen. Stuff like that's why Indiana lost the game. Ohio State didn't do anything. I mean, Will Howard threw a couple touchdown passes, but one of them was because they were at the freaking 10 because of the muff punt. Like, okay, like I'm not impressed. Riley Leonard does not do anything for me. Now, could he have a great game against Indiana? Sure. I've watched the guy tons. He is not that good.
He doesn't throw it that far, but he's been accurate. That good. He's been accurate.
Yeah, he's accurate, but he's not an NFL quarterback. That guy's not an NFL quarterback. The only way that he's making it in the NFL is if he develops down the field passing. You cannot be an NFL quarterback throwing 5-yard passes all game long and then using your legs. I mean, Tim Tebow used his legs a ton in college, and that's great, but then he goes to the NFL, can't use his legs anymore, and because his passing sucked. I mean, I know Riley Leonard's a better passer, but what I'm saying is that in the NFL now, you have to be really good, man, to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. It's kind of getting competitive. It's really getting competitive. It's not like it was back in like 2010 where almost any guy got a shot. It's not happening anymore. And I'm just not been that impressed with Riley Leonard. He's not the reason Notre Dame's 11-1.
Yeah.
The reason why Notre Dame's 11-1 is because they got a good run game and they've got a good defense. And that's where Notre Dame's going to win the game. Notre Dame's going to win the game if they force Indiana into turnovers, which absolutely could happen. Rourke's been great, but when he's been pressured, he makes mistakes.
That's the thing. Like with Riley Leonard,
that's where Notre Dame's going to win the game. I don't think that Notre Dame's offense is going to have a field day. I don't, because Indiana's done a good job stopping run all year. All year. I mean, Michigan didn't run on them. Ohio State didn't run on them. Washington didn't run on them. All the teams in the Big Ten that had great run offenses, they didn't run on. That doesn't mean Notre Dame won't. Maybe Jeremiah Love just goes crazy. But I'm just saying, until I see Indiana give up a lot of yards on the ground, I don't see it. Indiana's done a great job on the ground on defense. I think the difference in the game is if Indiana just does not turn it over, they could win. But if they make 2 or 3 mistakes like they did against Ohio State, then the game is going to be in favor of Notre Dame. I don't think Riley Leonard is a big factor in this game. I don't really think he's a factor at all in this game. I could be wrong, and I'm sure Notre Dame fans are going to go at me for saying that. But
I mean, he can make the 20 to 30 yard pass. It's when he goes for the home run ball that sometimes he just completely underthrows it. But he's been better at making the slightly deeper passes lately.
I'll say this:
Riley Leonard's top 10 for Heisman. That's what Brandon Frost says. I mean,
he was in the
honestly, the Heisman race has not been that exciting this year. There's really, I mean, it's been down to basically 4 guys all season, and everybody else was like way below. I mean, Rourke is 5th for Heisman, and he actually had a good season, but was a distant 5th. Or 6th, depending on the betting service or whatever, or the list. He's either 5th or 6th, and he's way behind the other 4. But now it's just Genty and Hunter, and I think it should be Genty. I've said that for weeks now. But the Heisman race, it wasn't this stacked list. You know what I'm saying? It was these top 4 guys, and then it was just a cliff behind. Like Will Howard, Riley Leonard. No, none of those guys were anywhere close to the Heisman race at all. Not even close. They did nothing to be Heisman winners. They weren't even close. And I don't even think Rourke was close. The only reason why he was closer than the other 2 is because he had less interceptions and more touchdown passes. That's it. Because Will Howard's pretty much actually between the 3 of those guys, he was the worst. He threw a lot of interceptions.
Oh, yeah.
Riley Leonard took care of the ball more, but he has way fewer touchdown passes than Rourke.
I mean, it's because he runs it. It's because he
There we
runs
go.
it in when he get. I mean, he runs it in when it's close. He's not going to pass when it's close.
Well, absolutely,
Like a
but
lot
I
of
mean,
other
like
quarterbacks
you
do.
saw Jaden Daniels when he, won the Heisman. Like, yeah, he had a lot of rushing stats, but he had a lot of touchdown passes. He had a lot of touchdowns. You have to. Riley Leonard has no shot to even be in the Heisman conversation, even if he is.
We got Ryan here. Ryan for
There
Bell,
you
Notre
go.
Dame writer.
Oh, there you go, man.
Yo, what's up, guys?
Appreciate you calling in, man. What are your thoughts on the game?
So I was being for most of this week I've been kind of even keel, unlike a lot of other Notre Dame fans. I think it's going to be an absolute shellacking of Indiana and South Bend. No, I had a pretty common ground. I think Notre Dame could win 10 by 10, 14. I think my score prediction was 38-28. And I think it's more of like a touchdown game. Kind of reminds me of like how the Louisville game will go. It's kind of how I expect it to go. And that was my original thoughts until, some Indiana fans on Twitter kind of been talking out of pocket a little bit, thinking that they're going to come into South Bend and beat us by 20 plus. I think that's just a mixture of they're so excited because they've never seen Indiana this good before, so they don't really know how to talk crap the right way.
Nebraska doesn't know how to talk crap either. They said they were going to beat Indiana by 40.
Nebraska fans, man.
Yeah. So now after seeing that, I'm kind of like, I was talking to Space. I'm like, I kind of want to beat Indiana by 50 now. But
Yeah.
in all seriousness, I think it'll be a good game. I think Indiana matches up better with Notre Dame than they did with Ohio State because the way Indiana, the weakness of Indiana's defense is by far their secondary. Ohio State had the athletes to take advantage of that through the air. But I will say that I think Notre Dame's running offense is better than Ohio State's. And if I remember correctly, didn't Seth McLaughlin go down against Indiana, or was that after?
Was that the Indiana game? Do you remember, Jeffrey? Was
He
that
got
the Indiana
hurt
game?
before the game.
Before the game, okay, yeah. So I think that it's going to be the key. Obviously, Indiana is going to have the same game plan that Louisville, Texas A&M, every other team we've played has had, is where they're going to stack the box and try to make Notre Dame throw. Which I think Notre Dame's faced that all year, so that shouldn't be a problem. I do have a concern about Notre Dame trying to be too cute, because that's what's gotten them a lot this year. Is early on in games we try to be a team that we're not, and I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame receives the ball first play of the game. Notre Dame wants to take a deep shot to catch Indiana off guard. That's just not our game. That's just not our game. I think if we stick to our bread and butter, you're eventually, and you don't make mistakes, kind of like you were talking about with Indiana, is if Notre Dame plays their game and doesn't make mistakes, doesn't turn the ball over, I think eventually later on in that game, the talent differential between Notre Dame and Indiana is just going to show. And I think that's where you get the 10-point, 7-point separation. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this game will be a blowout because I think Coach Signetti is too good of a head coach to let that happen. And I think he's going to make those guys learn from what happened against Ohio State, and they're not going to allow that stuff to happen again. So,
absolutely, fantastic analysis, Ryan. Because like most of what you said, I completely agree with. I mean, for real, I keep saying again and again that Indiana did not get blown out against Ohio State as much as the score would indicate. It was a much closer game than that. And most of Indiana's errors were either the refs being garbage, which I don't foresee this being as big of an issue in this game. And the second reason is Indiana made two really stupid mistakes. And it was their first big atmosphere all season. And like you said, Ryan, I do think that Signetti is going to have the team better prepared the second time around in potentially a slightly less hostile environment. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. And it being at night, it's going to be an insane game. And like I said, super excited about it. But, I mean, I'm not making my prediction right now. Neither is Will, because we're going to do that next week. But, I mean – Notre Dame has a better than 50% chance to win this game by far, and I most likely will pick them to win. I'm not making that official, but I mean Notre Dame is just a better team. just like Ohio State's a better team. Indiana does not have super talented guys. Even the guys that are, like potential draft picks like Rourke, Mikael Kamara, some of those type guys, they all have flaws. That's why they were 2-star recruits or 0-star guys. They all have flaws. I mean, but Kamara is a beast, but he's like 6'1". Like most of the big programs have 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" edge rushers. They can just run all over the field. Kamara's 6'1", 265. He's just small, but he's good, and Cignetti's made him even better than he ever would have been. But he's just it's a limitation. And then the depth. People are talking about that too. Indiana does not have the depth that Notre Dame does and these other teams have, but it's better than it's been. So I think, like you said, it's probably going to potentially be a game that is tied going into the fourth quarter or so.
Yep.
But then at the end, everything comes together, the crowd, the atmosphere, the night, just everything, the depth of Notre Dame, and Riley Leonard makes a big play or something like that, whether with his legs or, through the air, whatever, and then they win. Notre Dame by 7, 10, or even 14. I think that's just how the game's going to go. I don't see it being a blowout. If it is a blowout, I think it more speaks to Indiana not showing up. And I wouldn't say not showing up, but making the same errors they did against Ohio State and losing more so than Notre Dame. But I could be wrong. I mean, if Notre Dame plays great, they can blow them out. But I think if Indiana gets blown out, it's more Indiana's problem.
The biggest fear about this game is that if it's close and we have to kick it.
Yeah, I don't trust Mitch Jeter.
Yeah, Indiana's pitcher's been good, thankfully, all season. So that's
and it sucks because, I was just watching the game film against Texas A&M a couple nights ago, and looking back, and it's like Mitch Jeter hit 3 field goals, was 3 for 3, all from 40 plus, and they were all perfectly right down the middle. And I'm like, where is that guy?
Yeah,
where is that guy?
He's definitely injured still. He's not 100%.
Yeah, where's that guy that while he was at South Carolina had only missed 2 field goals his entire career, both of which were from 50 plus, and he had never missed a kick inside 50. It sucks, man, and that's why I hope it doesn't get to that point. I think eventually it's going to at some point in the playoff. But to your point, I think if this game, there's no way this game is a blowout unless Indiana just completely pulls, kind of like what happened with Army and Navy when we played those two teams, is turnovers cost them from the beginning, and our defense is so opportunistic. If you turn the ball over, once you start doing that, when it rains, it pours, because then you start forcing more things to make up for the mistakes you made on the previous drives, which then leads to more turnovers, and our defense feeds on that. So you can't do that, and I think it does help that you have a guy who's I think, was he a 5th-year guy? I believe Rourke's 5th-year guy, correct? Yeah. Yes. So he's played a lot of football. So I think that's helping you guys in that corner. I've been impressed with what I've seen from Rourke. I think that he's one of the better quarterbacks in the nation. One thing I did want to point to, though, is that I think that this defense, not necessarily along the D-line, I think Ohio State's D-line was better, but in terms of the back end, I think this will be by far the best secondary that Indiana's faced all year. And my question is, because you would know more about Indiana, I know that Elijah Surratt is super talented. Do you believe that they have the weapons at receiver to be able to, consistently get open on a consistent basis against Notre Dame secondary?
It's a great question, because I do think that, unfortunately, Indiana doesn't have a bunch of guys that are super fast at receiver, that can go downfield with it. And I think that's a big issue Notre Dame's had for a long time, too. Me and Will have talked about that for a long time, about wide receiver speed. What Indiana does have, though, is a couple of slot guys that catch a lot of short passes that can run with it. Miles Cross, especially Keyshawn Williams. Keyshawn Williams has been fantastic. I mean, his punt return against Michigan is why they ended up winning the game, because Indiana was on the ropes, and then he just broke tackles and went crazy on that punt return. But he's caught a lot of catches out of the backfield, or in the backfield, it's just short passes, and he's gone 40, 50 yards with it. But Indiana doesn't have a lot of receiver speed over the top. Surratt's the fastest guy that can run downfield, but even then, sometimes against really good, secondary guys, he can't break open. So Indiana is probably going to have to try to, dink and dunk a decent amount, like Riley Leonard probably will do, and then hope maybe they can break one or two downfield. But I think the biggest key in this game, honestly, is that Indiana has to be able to run the football. If Indiana can run the football on a consistent basis and make Notre Dame have to care about the run game, then that will open up Indiana's ability to be able to pass the ball. Because, unfortunately, why Indiana ended up, succumbing in the end ultimately to Ohio State by as much as they did is because once Indiana abandoned the run game, which they were having success with and was passing on every single down or trying to pass on every single down, it didn't work because Ohio State was just blitzing and blitzing and blitzing. And Indiana's O-lines actually ranked pretty well this year in pass blocking, but when you're going up against those great D-lines, it's just going to wear you down. So I just think, like, for Indiana to have a shot, the game's got to be close. It's got to be lower scoring, and they have to be able to establish the run to be able to set up the pass. And if that doesn't happen, then it could be an issue. But, yeah.
Ryan,
go ahead, Will.
One more question. How bad is Kingston's injury? Do you know if he could be back for the Georgia game if we win, or is he going to be out for the rest of the playoff season?
KVA?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's most likely done for the season unless we were to make it to the national championship.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot worse than what we thought. It didn't look that bad against USC, but I after was I believe the third or fourth quarter, he was on the sideline. He had a huge, hefty ankle brace on, so it's not looking good for KVA. But I mean, it's nice because we do have that depth at linebacker with Bowen, Snead, and Osbury, so it's not that big of a loss. But I mean, KVA he's definitely an elite guy at linebacker. One thing I did want to point out, though, I know that I think one of you guys had said Riley Leonard. You didn't think he was going to be a big impact. I disagree a little bit because this is my thing, and this is saying a lot because. Will's known me for a little bit. I'm one of the biggest, as a Notre Dame fan, one of the biggest Riley Leonard non-believers. I've been on that train for a long time, but even me, for me to admit that we are where we are because of Riley Leonard, not all, mostly, but there's a decent amount. If we had Sam Hartman on this team, Notre Dame is a 3-loss team. We might beat NIU, but we're a 3-loss team. We sure as heck lose to Texas A&M. We sure as heck lose to Louisville. And there's probably another third game we lose because the difference between Riley and Sam is Sam was a better passer, but he did not fit our offense because he was literally a statue in the pocket. Riley's ability to run, and he arguably might be the best running quarterback in all of college football. He's up there with like Jalen Daniels and Jalen Milroe in my opinion. If we don't have that, the ability to get away from sacks, run away from sacks, have that 6'4" frame where he can have a guy over his neck and somehow Houdini his way out of it. That we didn't have that the last few years. And I think that he's a big key. Now, the lack of the passing ability is what cost us against NIU. It can cost us in terms of having a legit passing game. But I think he fits better with Notre Dame's offense, and you've seen him start to actually learn his role with Mike Denbrock's offense. And that's why it's so frustrating for me because that's why I'm a big detractor of Riley Leonard because I can see the potential he has, and I see why last year, NFL scouts were drooling over this kid because he's got the height, he's got the build, he's got the arm, he's got the legs. He just has never fully put it together. And that's what's so frustrating is if Riley Leonard could even just be an above average thrower, he's a second, third round pick just based off intangibles. But he's never been able to do that. But yeah, I do think he's a big reason of why we are where we are. Because if we don't have a running quarterback, I'm telling you, this offense would look even worse than what it is right now.
Oh, I agree with that. Absolutely on Notre Dame's 11-1 season being a big part of Riley Leonard's play. I just don't think that this game's going to be that much determined by him. That's all I meant.
Yeah.
I just don't think that whoever, like, if Indiana, loses this game by 20 or wins by 10, like, I just don't think Riley Leonard's the biggest factor in this game. I think a lot of other things are going to go right or wrong for either team and what determines the result. Just because Riley Leonard just isn't that guy that's going to go out there and, post 5 or 6 touchdowns and just completely destroy you. I mean, he could, but we haven't seen that. Like, he's a guy that, he passes for 170 and a touchdown, and he runs for 50 and 2 touchdowns. That's Riley Leonard. I mean, he doesn't completely blow the doors off of nobody. Like I said, if Indiana loses, it's because they either made a lot of mistakes or Notre Dame's defense was just insanely good and figured IU out, and if Indiana wins because, they force a couple turnovers, maybe that's one of, like, Leonard's mistakes. Like, if Leonard throws a pick, that doesn't mean they're going to lose. But you are right. I agree with that. I mean, maybe I worded it a bit wrong, like, to really say Leonard, the way I said it made it sound like he's, like, just not a factor at all. That's not true. I just don't think he's a massive factor in this particular game. But for their season, yes, you're absolutely right. He has made Notre Dame better. But I do think it's more because of Notre Dame's, like you said, their offense being tailored for him. Because Sam Hartman was fine. It's just that I still to this day don't understand why Notre Dame added him. I don't even get it. I mean, because like you said, he didn't fit the offense. It didn't make any sense. I think Riley Leonard's in a situation where Notre Dame makes him better because of how they're playing and using him versus actually, like, Riley Leonard is just this guy that is so great and fantastic and top 10 pick stuff, because he is very flawed, got a lot of issues. I just think Notre Dame's made him better, whereas Notre Dame made Sam Hartman worse.
Yeah, and that's why, like, I and I'm sure Will agree with me. Notre Dame is at its best when they have a guy like a Deshaun Kaiser. A guy that can beat you through the air, but it can also is mobile enough to beat you with his legs. Even a guy like Ian Book, who
Look,
for whatever reason, Ian Book gets a lot of hate from Notre Dame fans.
Well,
I don't know why.
It's because Kelly, like, propped him up to be, like, as good as, like, Brady Quinn and Tony Rice.
Ian Book was a part of, like, Notre Dame's most relevant team in the last 15 years. So that's good. They were good.
You don't become the winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history and have, like, almost all the Notre Dame quarterback records and not be a good quarterback.
I thought
I'm an Ian Book stan. Like, I feel like if you would have put Ian Book on this team, we'd be a lot better than what we were with 2018 and 2020. I just don't think he necessarily had the coaching, and necessarily the players around him, the team around him necessarily to compete. But yeah, going back to the Indiana game, again, I think the key for Indiana is you have got to stop the run. You have to stop the run at all costs. And my biggest question is, I was going through Indiana's schedule. I've been watching I've watched all the games from, like, week 1 through week 7 right now. I'm still, going through the tape because that's kind of what I do when we have an opponent like this. I don't know, and this is my question to you, has Indiana faced a quarterback as mobile as, Riley Leonard to this point in the season?
It's a good question. Will Howard doesn't really run.
I'm thinking Alex Energy, maybe. I don't know if he necessarily played much against you guys.
Raiola didn't really run either. I mean, Charles, but he doesn't really run either.
Yeah.
I mean, the Northwestern quarterback kind of ran a little bit. Loach or Lau, however you pronounce it, Jake Loach, that guy. I mean, he ran a little bit, but not really. I mean, honestly, not really.
Because that's one thing I would be concerned about. If with on the Indiana defensive side is, well, I don't think Riley will be the reason that Indiana loses. If you don't key in on the those read option plays and those RPO plays where Riley can choose to run or not, that you can get in a lot of trouble there. Because then you start worrying about Riley taking off, and that's when Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price break those big runs because you're having to worry about Riley taking off. So that's where I would be really interested to see how Coach Signetti is getting those guys ready to play, because I know even Curtis Rourke, I'm not sure, I don't think he really runs that much. I know who's your guys' backup? Tavares?
Tavian Jackson.
Yeah, Tavian Jackson, yeah. I know he runs a decent amount, so I'm sure that, Coach Sig's probably having him run, with the team, having him, do a lot of QB runs and stuff, but nothing can compare you, especially if you haven't faced a running quarterback for the first time you play a guy like Riley Leonard. So I'm interested to see how, Indiana kind of combats that.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I mean, a lot of teams can't stop it. I mean, you look at like Alabama, LSU. I mean, why was that game destruction? Because LSU couldn't stop QB run. I mean, Milroe ran all over the field.
That was a PK special right there.
I mean, that game was hilarious. Like Jalen Milroe in that game was not even touched half the time. I mean, he was just running all over the field. And then next game against Oklahoma, it didn't do anything. I mean, Oklahoma didn't let Milroe run at all. Alabama just sucked in that game. I can't believe how bad they played. But yeah, I mean, like, it's going to be interesting because the thing is that I do think that Indiana can afford to give up some running from Leonard and the backs, but they can't allow the big chunk plays like you said. I mean, if they're giving up 5 and 7 yard runs, consistently, that's a problem because you're probably not getting them off the field. It's taking away possessions. But if you're giving up the 50-yard runs, then you're cooked. You can't do that. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how Indiana is able to stop that because I don't think Indiana's going to be able to stop their run game at all. I mean, that's not happening. I think that Indiana's done a remarkable job stopping the run, but they're not going to stop the run of Notre Dame. It's not going to happen, but can they just limit it? If they can limit it, then they can win. They just can't give up the big runs because they did that against Ohio State. I mean, I know in the chat saying that like Ohio State's running backs are overrated and all that. That's fine. I get that, but at the same time, still very talented backs, and Indiana shut them down, both. But like you said, Ohio State doesn't have the element of a running quarterback, so it does make it different. So it's interesting. I mean, like you said, I mean, if Leonard had an arm and Notre Dame had like a couple good receivers, I mean, they could realistically win the whole thing easily. But they just don't have that. They just don't have the receivers, and they just do not have passing a game. And that's what's going to limit them from being a potential title winner because everything else, the team's fantastic. Notre Dame's really darn good. But I mean, could they still win it all? Yeah, there's a shot. I mean, any of these teams have a chance. Indiana has a chance, even if it's 1%. Notre Dame's probably 8 to 10%, but there's a chance. But it's just it sucks for Notre Dame that they just are missing a couple things that probably would actually make them a legit title team. Even though they have a shot, but it's just a lot slower because of those flaws.
Yeah, and this might be a hot take. And I genuinely feel this way. Just watching all the teams just on our side of the bracket, State, or Texas, but I think, out of Indiana, Penn State, SMU, Georgia, the teams that we possibly could face in this tournament, I think Indiana matches up the best with Notre Dame in terms of what Indiana's strength is on defense and what Notre Dame's strength is. Weaknesses is on offense, and that might sound crazy to say because you got the Georgia Bulldogs right there. But if you paid attention to Georgia the last few weeks,
Georgia Tech game, man.
Yeah, like Georgia gave up over 250 plus rushing yards to UMass, over 200 to Tennessee, over 200 to Georgia Tech. So that feeds right into what Notre Dame wants to do. Indiana's got the number 1 rush defense in the nation. People can say all they want about the schedule and all that kind of stuff. Nobody had a problem with Michigan having the number 1 defense in the nation, even though they hadn't really played anybody with a pulse either last year. And it didn't matter when they got to playoff time. And I think Penn State, I think Indiana matches better with Notre Dame than Penn State does. Because I don't really think Penn State's all that good of a team. You saw what Oregon did to their defense. So how good really is Penn State's defense, And then, of course, SMU and Boise, that's kind of self-explanatory. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my hot take. I think Indiana it matches up the best with Notre Dame. Now, is that me saying I think Notre Dame goes to the national title? No, I still think that we probably lose to Georgia. But we got to get it. I mean, we got to get out of Indiana first. But yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. I think Indiana has a legit shot to get Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's funny that some people online are like, "Oh, can't wait for that Notre Dame Georgia game," and I'm like, yeah, you got this game first. Like, okay, I mean, it's not like you're playing the Citadel. That's what's funny. I mean, trust me, like Notre Dame most likely will win, but most Notre Dame fans are realistic to the point, be like, we've got to beat Indiana first. But there's a few. Just like there's a few, I mean, it's social media. That's why I don't really take it seriously. Because, I mean, yeah, there's a few Indiana fans like, oh, we're going to beat Notre Dame. But no, I mean, that's like probably two people that are just nuts, you know? Like, the reason why I laughed at Nebraska is because the majority of the Nebraska fan base was saying they were going to beat Indiana by 40. So, I mean, that's on them. They all said it. So, but with Indiana, it's just a couple crazy fans. And Notre Dame, it's a few strays as well. Most people legitimately think this is going to be a game, even though most people do think Notre Dame will win. I mean, they're favored by 8-10 for a reason. But I mean, yeah, like Notre Dame fans cannot overlook this game. The team doesn't need to overlook this game, and Indiana just needs to do everything that they possibly can to show up. Just not let the moment get too big for them, because you never know if it'll happen again. Just ball out. And you never know, you might end up winning. That's Indiana just doesn't need to think. Like, they just need to play ball. That's it. And for Notre Dame, it's basically the same thing. You can't play scared like, oh my gosh, we can't blow this game. We can't this will look terrible. No. For Notre Dame, just play like you did against Virginia and Purdue and all that. Treat Indiana like you treated those teams, and you won't win by as much, but you'll win probably by 17. Or 20. I mean, just do that. Both teams just need to ball out. Don't think about it being a playoff game. Notre Dame doesn't need to think about all the times they've choked in these big games in the past. And Indiana just needs to be like, hey, we belong. Like, prove that we belong. And don't freak out and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've told some of my Notre Dame fans in our group chat that have already been like, everybody, when they first announced that we were going to get this home game, they was like, we're buying our tickets. Everybody's going to go, because we assumed, we're going to play in Alabama. We're going to play a Southern team playing in the cold. And then the minute it was announced Indiana, everybody was like, man, I'm not wasting my money on going to watch Notre Dame play Indiana. I'm going to sell my tickets for triple the price, because we know Indiana fans will probably pay it. And then I'm going to go book my hotel and buy tickets for the Sugar Bowl. And I'm like, you guys need to chill out, man. We lost to NIU at home. Can you come on, man? You can't do that. But yeah, and then I'm hoping that it's a good game, and who knows, maybe this could re-spark a rivalry, because I mean, we know Purdue's not doing anything; they're not bringing anything to the matchup anymore. So I mean, can we swap out Indiana for Purdue? Because I mean, we both beat them 66-0, which is also a crazy stat. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for a good game. And I mean, I think we're going to get a classic in South Bend for sure.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. 9 days away still. And I want the game to get here. I can't wait for it. It's gonna.
I'll be there. I don't know if Will will be there. I'm gonna be there.
I can't afford it, man. I
got lucky.
I don't think most people can afford it, but
dude, I got lucky. I bought my tickets a week and a half ago when they were like $200, $300 a ticket, and I was like, gotta hurry.
That's a steal. That's a steal.
Yeah, but I appreciate you guys having me on. I gotta go, do some stuff with the wife. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and you guys do a great show. But
appreciate it, Ryan.
Yeah,
thanks,
go Irish and beat Hoosiers.
Go Irish. We got Abel here talking about tickets. Abel, I would go to SeatGeek. I know Notre Dame's partnered with SeatGeek, so I would say you're less likely to get scammed there. But we got Mark here.
appreciate Mark for showing up in the chat. I can only imagine what's going on in here. Having a great time. We're having a great time talking Indiana and Notre Dame. It's been a very fun show. Appreciate it, Mark. But we got one more caller of the night so far. I mean, you never know. Maybe we'll have one more. But we got our final caller of the night for now anyway. Darrell MVP, the SEC legend. Everybody knows Darrell MVP for his take, especially on the SEC. So appreciate you for stopping by, Darrell.
I hope they know me for the good takes and not all the ones I get wrong, but I feels like it's backwards. Nobody remembers you for all the correct things you say.
No, Darrell. I've gotten, ironically, so many takes right this year. I've been right on a lot of things this year, but those couple that I'm wrong, like those 2 or 3 egregious ones that I was wrong, those are the only ones people remember. All the good takes, nope.
That's the way it goes. I'll be completely honest. Maybe I know I'm in the minority in college football fan. These matchups, man, I think there's one team that's heavily favored and should be significantly, and I got the other side, which is how do they win the game? And for this game, it's Notre Dame. Man, if Notre Dame just runs the ball up the middle, it's going to be hard for me to see Indiana slowing them down. I think it's important for Indiana to come out to a quick, fast start. Maybe Riley Leonard throws a turnover. Maybe Notre Dame does just Notre Dame-y things. But, Will, how does it feel? Like, this is maybe the first time in 30 years where they're expected to win a big game. Like, how does it feel to be the hunted instead of the hunter?
Honestly, I would be worried if this was a Brian Kelly coach team, but like Marcus seems to have he seemed to learn his lesson from the NIU debacle. I mean, this like from what I watch on the Notre Dame YouTube, like him like firing up the guys to get ready. They haven't been looking past anyone. I'm feeling pretty good about the game, but there is at the back of my mind, like my whole life, I'm not going to say not my whole – this is sad to say, but like my whole life I have been disappointed by Notre Dame. But I'm feeling extremely good just with how this team's played. They haven't looked past any ACC opponent they've faced. What is Freeman's biggest win? I mean, you can say the A&M game. You could say the USC game, the Clemson game. I mean, those weren't huge.
Really, I mean, they're all those, I mean, are –
yeah,
not even.
I felt pretty good after those wins.
Yeah, it's weird to me because normally I don't think Indiana is one of the 10, 15, or 20 best teams in the country. They have the resume of that team, and they've done everything on the football field to prove it. I just don't believe it. I'm sorry, Jeffrey,
but you're going off talent, Darrell, because that's what you're going off of, then no. And me and Mark talked about this yesterday. And sorry to cut you off, but yes, if you're going off talent, Indiana's not even in the top 25. But there are a lot of teams more talented than Indiana that either have crappy coaches or players that don't care about the program, and that's why they underperform. So then you have teams like Indiana that have less talent and an easier schedule, but a coach that is just better and committed and focused. And that's what rises Indiana above LSU, above, South Carolina, whatever, these teams that on paper are way better. South Carolina is not the best example, but especially LSU. That's a great example. LSU is a more talented team than Indiana by far, but LSU's season was garbage compared to Indiana's. Different schedules, different circumstances, but still, I agree with you, though. Yes, Indiana, by talent, is not a top 20 team, but based off what they've done in their coach, yes. But it's just impossible to compare because they don't all play the same schedules and stuff.
I understand that. And the game that doesn't concern me, it concerns me more is the Michigan game, not the Ohio State game, because Ohio State, outside of the Michigan mental meltdown because they're a soft program with a soft head coach, and they're just Charmin soft. Maybe they'll get an NIL deal with Charmin with how soft they are. But the Michigan game, Indiana should have won that game by 14 to 17 points if they are legit, in my opinion, one of the 15 or 10 best teams. But Michigan doesn't have a quarterback and throw the football, I believe. I still believe they're on the search for him unless Bryce Underwood. And for Indiana just to kind of play around and have a legitimate chance to lose that game tells me that Indiana on the lines of scrimmage just can't compete. I know Michigan's got a superior defensive line than Notre Dame. But I don't think but this is going to be one of the best defensive lines Indiana's going to have to play and best offensive line because Notre Dame's just that talented. So I think Riley
definitely
Leonard's
the best offensive line that Indiana's played.
Right. I
this
think
season.
Riley Leonard's not going to have to be Superman to win this game. I think if he's just an average, if he's slightly better than Davis Warren, if he's like the 50th best quarterback in college football, seriously, I think they win this game by 14 plus points. Like, I think this will be close at halftime. It'll be like 17-10, 17-7. But I think that third and fourth quarter, I think it could get ugly. I mean, I think Indiana may need to go for an onside kick at the beginning of the game to try to throw Notre Dame off, throw a few trick plays in there. Because if Indiana just lined up and matched with Notre Dame and didn't do any pizzazz, I just don't see how they're going to be competitive, to be honest. And it's not to take away from Indiana's season, and this is what I hate most about the 12-team playoff, is in my opinion, we're punishing Indiana by playing a team that's just way above them. We should have Indiana play teams that they can beat, and then in my format that I've been promoting, the +1 format, they couldn't then sneak their way into the national title game. But in this format, they're going to have to play a Goliath.
Sure. I mean,
yeah. Will, did you watch Always Irish's take on this matchup?
I haven't gotten to him yet, but I do watch Always Irish a lot, but I haven't gotten to his Indiana preview stuff yet.
Well, he was talking about, and this stunned me, he was talking about how this could be the absolute worst matchup for Notre Dame. And I'm just thinking, really? This is the worst matchup in the first round for Notre Dame football is Indiana, not Alabama, not SMU,
well, it was because he was worried about like not having the territorial matchup.
Right. I understand home field advantage and stuff and how it's a short drive away, but in terms of just the playing ability, just the teams, because in my opinion, if Indiana or these other teams want to pull off an upset, you need to be a 2022 Tennessee type team. You need to be able to score 50, 60 points a game, have explosives. And while Indiana is scoring all those points, they're not really explosive. They're just methodically beating the will out of their opponents. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that in this game. But
I mean, just statistically, they're the number one run defense. I mean, that's probably part of what John said. And that is Notre Dame's strength. But I do think Notre Dame's lines of scrimmage are bigger and more talented than Indiana. So they should get a good push on both of those sides. And I think that'll be huge in Notre Dame's favor.
Absolutely. I mean, Indiana's last few recruiting classes have all been in the 40s and 30s, and Notre Dame recruits way better. I mean, they just have a better team. I mean, it's going to be really hard, and it's going to be interesting to see how Indiana's line of scrimmage does, but it's going to be very hard for them to compete straight up. I mean, I agree with the real that probably some funky stuff's going to have to happen. Maybe a fake punt. Maybe, Indiana might have to do a couple things because, it's these games aren't fair. I mean, if you really want to, be completely honest, they're not. College football is not fair. I mean, we watch a sport that is not fair. We've always watched a sport that's not fair. I've seen Alabama go up against tons of teams that were top 25-ish caliber from other leagues, and they've just completely blown the doors off of them. Like Alabama when they didn't make the playoffs and they played Kansas State in that bowl game. You might remember that?
I remember when Kansas State scored first, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Deuce Vaughn!"
That game was sad.
And then,
Kansas State had a good year, and that game was sad. It was absolutely pathetic. That's college football most of the time. It's not fair. It's absolutely not fair. Does that mean that Kansas State coach is bad? Does it mean Kleiman can't coach? Does it mean they have a bad team? No, but it means that Alabama's talent advantage is so vast that it's not fair. And Alabama imposed the will on Kansas State, and they had no shot. And the Indiana Notre Dame it's not that big of a gap here versus Bama K-State that season. But I mean, it's not fair. The advantage for some of these really big brand teams and the talent that they acquire, it's so large. And we still watch the games anyway because we love football, and the big teams have the biggest fan base for a reason. But I mean, I don't know. It's just Notre Dame's better. They're flat out better than Indiana when it comes to talent. But Cignetti is, in a lot of people's mind, better than Freeman as a coach. I can't say that. It's too early to say.
Yeah,
I
but for me,
I think Freeman's good.
I mean, I
but,
think what Marcus has done
yeah.
best is that, like, he got Mike Denbrock and Al Golden to be his coordinators. Like, he doesn't have to be the perfect coach because he's got, like, two of the best, probably a top 10 at the worst coordinator at each position that really he can be the CEO. He doesn't have to be worried about the strategy all the time.
Well, see, that's why you have to have good coordinators too. I mean, that's why it's so important for Cignetti to keep the coordinators he has, and they've kept them all outside of one. One guy left. Everybody else looks like they're staying, and if they do, that's a big win because coordinators make a big, difference in determining whether your team's going to be good. We got Darrell back though after he dropped off, but he's back now.
Hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Hey,
it's good
Darrell.
to be back. Sorry about the issue, but
no problem.
I know Indiana. I guess conspiracy theories out to get me today. Just
I don't know about that, but you never know.
Now, Will, I wanted to explain this to you as well. If, in my opinion, when Notre Dame wins this football game, this doesn't mean that the curse of 30 years is over with. Because all we've done is just lowered the bar of expectations to the point where Notre Dame, the ultimate pretender, can still win something. That's all we've done. If you want to prove me wrong, and the vast majority of people, in my opinion, go beat Georgia. Okay?
I feel like this is our best chance to play Georgia, like for any team to play Georgia, because especially with their lack of run defense and their backup quarterback.
Well, I told this to Will the other day. I told this to Will the other day, and I've told multiple people this. Georgia is 6 points, or 5 points rather, of not being in the playoff. 5 points, 6 points among 3 games. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're talking about a 2-point win over Georgia Tech. You're talking about a 3-point win over Texas and a 1-point win over Kentucky. They could be 8-5. I mean, this team is beatable. They keep finding ways to win because of their sheer talent. And that Georgia Tech game was just flat out rigged. I don't care. That game was rigged. I don't like using that word.
Yeah, it was rigged because the SEC team lost. Rigged because the SEC team lost. The calls went both ways. It happened both ways.
That Georgia Tech game was rigged.
No, that end of the fourth quarter, if you look at as Georgia Tech was driving, and I think first down in midfield, it was an obvious fumble, but they didn't even review it. In my opinion, they should have. He tucked the ball in. They said incomplete. I think that was the worst call. I know Kirby Smart was in the midfield, basically trying to call timeouts and stuff, but I mean, come on, Jeffrey, don't be an Ohio State man and make excuses.
No, I'm not making excuses. I don't care about Georgia or Georgia Tech. What I'm saying is that freaking Georgia Tech game was rigged. I don't say that about hardly any games, and I know Mark's saying in chat. I get it. I don't like saying it, but like 98% of people watch the game and agree with what I'm saying right now. That was garbage. Georgia Tech got completely just trounced by the Zebras. That Haynes King freaking targeting missed call. I mean, the commentators didn't even talk about that. He got his head blown off, man. Dude lowers his head right at King. King's head whips back, nothing. And then Georgia fans are like, oh, he hit him in the chest. No, he didn't. And yes, I've said this about 95 times as well, Troy V. If Lagway doesn't get hurt, Georgia loses to Florida too. Like I said, your team was 1 point away from beating them. Georgia is not all that. That's to Will's point. If Notre Dame's going to beat Georgia, it's this year. Mm-hmm. It is this year. This Georgia team. Georgia is not on the same level of their previous teams. That's what I'm saying. They're not even.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
They have been bailed out. And that Georgia Tech game, they absolutely were bailed out.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. They're not as good as.
I don't care if I'm wrong saying that the game was rigged. I don't care. They should have lost that game. And the other games, they haven't been impressive either. So, yeah, if Notre Dame wins, what are people going to say if Notre Dame beats Georgia, though, Darrell? They're going to say, Georgia's down. It's not that impressive. See,
I'll say it's a good win for Notre Dame. I'll say congratulations. Notre Dame's finally done something within the last 30 years. That's what I'll be saying. I don't know what other people will be saying. But look, very consistent on this. If you want to go and prove that you're better than the SEC or Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State, then you know what you do? You go out and win the football game. You don't say, well, the zebra mans were out to get me. Oh, if the targeting call didn't go my way, then it's all the ref's fault, or ESPN has bias and they want the bettors to lose and stuff. Just go out and beat us. That's what I say. Just beat us on the football field. Because I know you all know this, but Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they've lost football games before, and they will lose football games in the future. This was all about ratings, and every year, those teams with the biggest fan bases would always win the games. If it was rigged, then Michigan would have beaten TCU in 2022. If it was rigged, SMU wouldn't be in the playoffs right now.
Not every game's rigged. There are bad calls. The Georgia Tech game was rigged.
It felt
rigged, Daryl.
I mean,
it felt rigged.
The word Daryl. The thing is, like, you know that what's the guy's name?
That game was garbage.
Tessitore. It felt like you wanted Georgia to win. Which
yes,
is
he did want them to win.
It made the game feel weird.
The commentating was so impartial, or not. I've said it backwards. Yeah. Am I saying it right? Yeah.
You're basically saying it was biased against Georgia Tech.
It was biased. It was not impartial, or whatever it would be. But
I know, like the SEC pays ESPN a lot of money, but like it takes away from the fan experience.
Dude, it was terrible. I mean, everybody loved those classic commentators back in the past. The commentators today are just getting worse, especially when it's like it's not 50-50, man. You're watching the game and it's like, wow, amazing. This team, this other team, they're battling it out. It's like, oh my gosh, Georgia, if they win, they're in the playoff. It's like, dude, just no. Like,
I'll agree it was oversaid, but that was a true statement. That was a true statement. If Georgia won that game,
say it 8 billion times. It's just dumb.
I agree. You didn't. I thought it was oversaid much, but that doesn't, in my opinion, prove that the game was rigged against Georgia.
I'm not saying that because the commentator said that it was rigged. What I'm saying is that I watched the game and most people online agreed that the calls all went mostly in Georgia's favor. Maybe there was like one call, like you mentioned, that Georgia Tech, that the fumble thing, yeah, whatever. But like there was like 9 or 10 Georgia plays that should have been called that they didn't call. And I just throw the Haynes King one because that's the one that sticks in my mind the most. But if I go back and watch that game, I could post them on Twitter. I basically did. I was retweeting all night. Like, this call sucked. This call sucked. This call sucked. And everybody was like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Georgia should not have won this game. The only thing Georgia Tech did wrong was that prevent defense at the end. But other than that, I mean, literally, it was insanely biased on the calls. But it doesn't matter. I don't even care about the freaking game. The Kentucky game proves Georgia's not legit, elite. The Texas game proves that they're not elite. The Mississippi State game proves that they're not elite. The freaking Florida game proves that they're not elite. They should have lost. Lagway goes down, they win. What I'm saying is that Georgia is a 9-3 or 8-4 team masquerading as a top 5 team. And yes, Mark says Georgia is still one of the 5 best teams in the country. Based on talent, they are. Maybe Kirby is top 5 coach and all that in the country, but this team does not play like one of the 5 best teams in the country. Yeah, on paper, they are one of the 5 best teams in the country. I'm not going to deny that. They have all the talent. They got a bunch of guys that should probably be in jail for things that they've done all in the offseason. But at the end, whatever. Great team. But this team is not what Georgia used to be. It's way worse. And I wish they were 8-5 right now. Because if they were 8-5, then nobody would be talking about them. The Notre Dame beating Georgia is going to end up, if that happens, if Notre Dame beats Georgia, then that's going to become Georgia's not as good this year. It's not that impressive. That's what I'm trying to say. You're saying it will be derailed, and I agree with you that it would look great for Notre Dame, but the media is going to spin it, well, Georgia's not that good. Yeah, because they shouldn't even be in the playoff. That's my point.
Well, Jeffrey, I didn't realize I could unleash this tiger, and you had, no offense, but you sound like all the ACC Big 12 people that are you just want to see the SEC's downfall just for the sake of seeing
the SEC's downfall. I want to see Georgia's downfall this season.
Is it because they're winning too much?
No, it's because of the fact that I don't like their team at all. I can't stand their team, and their incidences off the field are starting to catch up with them on the field. It's catching up with them. Okay, when you have issues off the field, DUIs, all these crimes being committed, and your team is just bad culture, bad discipline. Kirby's going off all over the place on these guys because they're not using their heads in the game. They're just not as disciplined as they used to be. It's bleeding out on the field, and they deserve to be 8-5 because if they did, then that would have woke Kirby up to start actually getting guys that are actually going to go out there on the field and be great players like the ones he had 4 or 5 years ago. And also have guys that off the field are going to be stand-up citizens as well, instead of basically being Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M 2.0. That's my problem with Georgia. It's nothing to do with the SEC. I'm not an SEC hater at all. I don't like Georgia's football team this year. I do not like Georgia's football team, and they should be 8-5.
Well, in my opinion, they should be what the record is because they played the games and the record is what it is. But I understand that sentiment. I understand that attitude. But listen, Georgia, in my opinion, Kirby Smart's done everything reasonable he can do. He really has no real tough enforcement mechanisms because the NCAA, because they're idiocy, in my opinion,
that's
has
why
taken them
Saban
away.
Retired.
Right.
That's why Saban retired.
So, I mean, there's only so many things you can do to try to get people to do the right thing. And eventually it's just the players' decisions not to do the right thing. You can only go to so many seminars. You can only go to so many classes. You can only be told the same thing over and over again. And if they're still making the decisions, I think you should put the fault on that. So those decisions with the individual players. But I don't think it's really fair to root against an entire team and organization when I feel like they're trying to do the right thing.
Doesn't it feel like Florida, though? Like Florida with Urban Meyer, that team was trash. Like the whole culture was trash. And then Tebow. Oh, Tebow, he's awesome and he's the leader and he makes team, not trash. No, that team was trash. The urban organization down there in Florida in the late 2000s was trash. Complete garbage. And Tebow masked all of it. The entire thing. Georgia doesn't have that. I mean, you've got a quarterback that's dating a women's basketball player and all that kind of junk. And ever since that, he's been playing like trash. So, I mean, it's just not a good culture. I don't like Georgia's culture at all.
What does that have to do with anything? He's just dating another athlete.
The funny thing about it is when Georgia first beat Alabama, I was rooting for them. They've gone downhill. The entire culture and program has just gone downhill. It's just frustrating to watch. I don't know why. I guess I'm out of left field on it. I just don't like it. But
that's fine. But I mean, if Georgia had a great culture, then I guess they would be considered right there with Nick Saban's dynasty because they could win 3 out of 4 national championships if they won it this year, and they've got the easiest path, in my opinion, to get to the national championship game. So if they had a good culture, just a decent culture, then I guess we should just pack up our bags and just not even play the games.
I think me and Darrell are definitely not on the same page with this. I think you know what I'm saying, and I understand what Darrell's saying. I get what you're saying, Darrell. I totally get it, but that's not what I'm saying.
Well, I get what you're saying. You're saying you're not rooting for Georgia because of the off the field issues, and that is painting it to the level.
Because it's just not that good, man. I mean, that's
your opinion that they're not that good, but I value the wins against Texas and stuff, and their resiliency to overcome the close game. Like this is something I don't agree is people just say, well, they're not playing like one of the 5 or 10 best teams. Well, you got to analyze that who you're comparing it to.
It's not just speeding tickets, man. DUIs is a much worse thing than speeding. DUIs can kill people. It's like with Alabama. I had an issue with the fact that, yes, Nick Saban, because talent and because 5 stars and because whatever, yeah, okay, a lot of guys Alabama had a lot of problems. The only difference is a lot of those guys committed all their garbage when they went to the NFL. Does that make it right? No, it doesn't. I didn't like that. I mean, Henry Ruggs, his career's gone because of what he did. Just insanely stupid. But Georgia's guys are doing dumb stuff in college. And I know that you'd be like, well, it's college. Of course you're going to do dumb stuff. There's a difference between doing dumb stuff and then half the team doing the same thing. That's the difference. I mean, like, really? It's like that one NFL player that his teammate literally died because he got hit by a drunk driver, and then he literally got caught drunk driving like a week later. That is the most insensitive thing I've ever seen. That is insane. Like, why would you do that? Like, doing that anyway is stupid, but then to do that a week after your team, I don't get it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, dude, I'm not this.
It just defies all logic. You're just trying to make sense out of common sense out of nonsense. That's your issue. It doesn't need an explanation. It's just stupid and silly and it's irrational. You can't put rationality on irrational behavior. And unfortunately, a lot of the Georgia players, I believe see the difference I think between me and you is I believe Kirby and the Georgia administrators and Georgia people, the head honchos, are doing everything to try to institute good cultural values. It's just the players, for whatever reason, making stupid decisions. And I put that on the players. I think you're putting it on the team as well as the players. I think that's the only disagreement. But I agree with you. These are stupid decisions. I agree with you. They're immoral decisions. And I agree that if they do any stupid decisions, they should face the full consequences of those decisions.
Do you agree with me, though? Because I agree absolutely. Do you agree with me, though, that do you think that the off-the-field stuff is influencing Georgia's play? I do.
I mean, it has to. I don't know how much, though, if it matters. That's the real issue. I don't know.
I think it does. Now, I could be wrong. The thing is like we're having, this conversation back and forth, and you're making great points. I don't know if my points are good or not. I have no idea. But the thing is that I think we both definitely, like I said, have good points, and I think we both, have similar agreements and similar disagreements about the situation. I just think that, like I said, the difference with me is that I think that it's affecting the play a lot more than you do, and maybe I'm blaming Kirby too hard. I don't know. I just, the thing is, like, I have nothing against the SEC at all. I like Alabama, and yes, Mark, Saban, Kevin Ummer, guys, the rest of the band. Again, I don't like it. I don't like it. I just don't. I don't. But I'm not a coach, man. I'm not a coach. I mean, I understand the pressure to not get rid of a player that is freaking great. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get that. You can't just be like, oh, well, you know what? You're the best D-line in the country, but you just did this stupid thing, but you're off the team. No, they're not going to do that. I get that. Because then it hurts the team on the field. But you having that guy on your team and him doing that kind of stuff, then therefore influences the other players as well. I mean, because again, Mark's saying here, 24 players doing the same thing, the exact same stupid crap. It's insane. And then, like Joe saying, Kirby doesn't. There's no punishment. They're out there. It's like Tyreek Hill in the NFL. The guy gets in trouble driving 115 in his McLaren, and then he's out there playing on the football field 2 hours late. Again, I know it's different situations. The culture in college football as a whole has gone downhill because of NIL and the portal, and it's all about, like, me and the player, and if you do anything, coach, that I don't like, I'm going to bolt for another program, so I can't do anything. But the problem is I just think at Georgia and Alabama to a lesser extent, but Georgia's worse right now, is that their culture sucks harder. And there's a lot more problems going on because of the players they bring in being the type guys that they bring in. And typically guys that do more stupid crap tend to be guys that are better players. Not always. There are guys that are 2-stars that do stupid crap. But the 5-star guys that are making all the money and then they got all the money, it seems like they're the ones doing more wrong. But I do agree with you. There's not much Kirby can do. I just don't think Kirby's doing enough. He's got to do something. He's not doing anything. If he can't do anything, then it is what it is.
Players. I thought he talked to the players, had meetings, brought people in for seminars and stuff like that. I just think Kirby's in a lose-lose position because he can't do anything in terms of real effective punishment, because as soon as he tells somebody you're off the team, he'll be like, well, he'll just go somewhere else and maybe go against Georgia, and it'll be the reason they lose the national championship game.
Here's this. I love this comment. It's this Jay Grizz says it's crazy because I always felt like Georgia had good guys back in the day. Now, I can't back that up at all because I wasn't alive back then, and I only know a few of their players from the past. Jackson, he knows the history of college football way better than me. I read some stuff but don't know as much. But Yeah, it just feels like Georgia's gone downhill. You know what I'm saying? Like as a whole, as a culture, and as a program recently, because now they are bringing in the type players that A&M and Bama would bring in. And those guys, it's just different. And I agree with you, Darrell. Kirby, lose. I don't know. To me, it's the same thing with A&M. Honestly, I was kind of reveling in the fact that A&M was garbage. Like when they had the pot guys in the locker room and stuff, like I was like, great, they're going out in the field and they're getting beat. This is awesome. It's not an SEC thing, to real. It's for me. I just it would have been nice to see Georgia lose 5 games this year, so then that might wake them up. The players, anyway. Even if it's not Kirby having to do anything, it's just the players will be like, wow, maybe us doing stupid stuff off the field makes our team worse. I don't need to do that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part.
No,
Maybe
I get what you're saying.
Wrong, but that's what I'm saying. For me, I'm a person that when somebody does something wrong, then there's got to be punishment and consequences. And if it's not going to be from the coach, if it's not going to be from the NCAA or anything like that, then them losing football games would be a good alternative.
No, I get what you're saying. It's hard to argue with what you're saying. I just wish. I think you're looking for a white and black solution when, unfortunately, we don't live in that type of moral and just world. I'm sorry, it's just the reality of the situation.
We're all flawed human beings. I make mistakes every day. I'm sure we all, Will, you, Darrell, we all screw up. I mean, I've screwed up tons of times. I mean, I do things wrong all the time. Like I said, I'm not a morally, just super righteous human being. Will never, ever, ever, ever claim to be that. I mean, again, flawed person. So, I mean, I'm probably not even the best person to be saying any of this stuff. It's just it's just my opinion, that I think Georgia's worse on the field because of these, situations. And I would have liked to have seen them lose games that I felt they should have lost, and they didn't. So their team is fine. Like all the issues with the program is just, it's being covered up because they're winning. It goes back to that phrase, as long as you're winning, it's all good, or however it's phrased, right? Winning cures all. So like Georgia's all these issues, even though there's headlines about it all season long, if Georgia was 6-7 right now and they were having all this disputes and issues going in the program, Kirby's under fire, the program's under fire, the NCAA's investigating, you know what? But they're winning, so it doesn't matter. And that's what I don't like. To me, but again, maybe that's just me.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's totally fair and valid. It's just in an ideal, and I would say just a society, your points would be taken into account and would be the correct outcome and the proper outcome. It's just, unfortunately, I don't have the power to make those changes, and I don't think either of you all have the power to make those changes. So the reason, though, I was accusing it of SEC bias is because anytime I hear anything bad about the SEC, it's always, or one specific team, it's really just a shadow argument for hating every SEC team. And I've seen it so much recently with the only 3 SEC teams in the playoffs. That's why I went that direction. It's clear to me this is just a behavioral bias incident, which I think is a clear and obvious bias to have.
No. Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's behavioral. Absolutely. It had nothing to do with conference. So yeah, you're good on that. I just wanted to clear that up. I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole with that, but like, no, it's definitely for me. I mean, I cannot dislike the SEC when one of my favorite teams is in the SEC. But I mean, Alabama, I have such a tough relationship with because I love the Alabama Crimson Tide, and I always will. But yeah, they're another program that just has a ton of problems. I just feel like Georgia's is worse now, but yeah, Alabama's had a lot of problems, and it does tend to be because of the players you get. I mean, you just don't see, Rutgers and even Vanderbilt, having issues like that because they don't bring in those type players. They just don't.
Right. Maybe it's me being a little bit more cynical than you, but I think there is a level of also of this of those teams aren't good enough to have it warranted and read out in the press. I think that's a level of it as well. I don't think anybody cares if the Vanderbilt players fade out.
Fair. I mean, it could be true. I mean, honestly, there's not really a lot of Vanderbilt writers. True. I mean, I don't know. It's crazy. It honestly is. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see overall. I've watched Georgia almost every game that they've played this year, and this team just looks significantly worse than in the years past. And maybe, again, I'm taking way too much into account of the off-the-field stuff. I probably am more than anybody on YouTube talking about it. And, again, it's my opinion, and I could be completely wrong. And if I am, I'll admit it in the future. But something just doesn't look right to me about them. That's why I do think Notre Dame could beat them. But the thing is, though, is Georgia can still get their junk together. I mean, like you said, the Texas game. When they want to play, that talent comes together, and they can look darn good. I'm talking about the first Texas game. But they have had a lot of bad games this year, more than they ever have in the last 4 or 5 seasons. It's like 6 games. It's not 2 or 1. It's 6. I count 6 games that they've played bad. And even bad.
What I think's happening, Jeffrey, with you is you're comparing Georgia against a Georgia, and you're not comparing this Georgia team against the field. And I think, no offense, Will, but even though this is the worst Georgia team in probably 5-8 years in terms of the on-field results, I still would favor them over probably every Notre Dame team over the last 5 to 8 years. And that's just the gap of the programs, because Notre Dame is the ultimate pretender. And until they win something and get somebody significant, I can't believe in them. Because every time even against bad teams like Oklahoma State, they somehow find a way to lose because they're Notre Dame. They're the ultimate pretender. So
that's why we picked South Carolina in the bowl game a couple years ago. Remember, all of us went South Carolina, and Notre Dame did win. They did beat Rattler, but
I think Georgia's a little bit of a step up from that South Carolina team. Even with their backup quarterback, I will take the backup over Spencer Rattler.
Mark says, I've gone off on the Georgia driving issues a zillion times. That's why you're the voice of college football, Mark. Okay, like there's not many people doing it, right? Like you've done it. Me, not many other people, So yeah, I mean, thankfully, I'm definitely glad you pointed it out, Mark. I mean, yeah, it's I don't know what it is. It's just a very I don't like the term pet peeve because it just sounds wrong, but it's just an issue that I have with certain teams. I just don't like bad culture. That A&M Jimbo culture was bad. The Georgia one now is getting really bad. I didn't like the Florida one back in the day. And yeah, it's not an SEC bias thing. It just, unfortunately, it's just the type players that those programs get. That's the unfortunate thing. I mean, it is what it is. Never going to change because, I mean, the SEC brings in the top talent. And not everybody that's super talented does bad things. There are tons of talented players that are great standout citizens. But because, I mean, even with Georgia, like I joke half the team. It's not even been half the team. It's been like a fourth or a third, but still it's a lot. But the thing is that, unfortunately, there was an old saying that I remember someone saying like 10 bad incidences or 10 good incidents, rather. Sorry, I take that back. 10 good incidences always get outweighed even by just one bad incident. You're going to remember that one bad incident better than 10 good incidents. So you go to a restaurant 10 times and it's great, and then you go that 11th time and it's just so bad you'll never go again. You know what I'm saying? And that's just kind of what it feels like. So even though like 3/4 of Georgia's team doesn't commit stupid driving incidents, it's just that 1/4 that just outweighs the good. I don't know. And same thing with A&M and Florida. Not all those players were bad. Not all of them did bad things, but so many of them did. It just stains the image. It stains the program. And unfortunately, again, since A&M didn't win a lot with Jimbo, they got like ratted out by everybody. But with Georgia, again, it's just getting overlooked. People aren't looking at it because they're winning games. And that's what I don't like. Like, people should still be upset about it regardless, whether they're winning games or not, whether they want to blame Kirby or not. They don't even have to blame Kirby. Just be like, this is a problem. But most people just don't care. Like, so many Georgia fans don't even care. I'm telling you, if Georgia went 8-5 or 7-6 this year, like they were actually close to doing, Georgia fans would be going nuts right now. And they'd be like, oh, it's a discipline problem. Kirby, it's his fault. But since they're 11-2, Georgia fans are like, we're the dogs. We're going to beat everybody up. That it's just it's hypocrisy. It's completely just differing opinions from the same people that would have different opinions based off some games, went in a different direction. Like, you should be upset at your program's issues, even though you're 11-2, but they're not. They're fine with it. But if they were 7-6 right now, they would be just eating into Kirby. It's Kirby's fault. He's not instilled the right culture. It's like, what are you doing? Like, really? Like, I know some people are just so biased toward their team, but really? I don't get it. Like, I don't get it.
Well, it's because the most important column in college football and all of sports is the W column versus the L column.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Will, we haven't heard anything from you for a while.
I know.
Kind of like Notre Dame over the last 30 years.
I'm tired too. DeReal perked me up. He always does. He always does.
Yeah, I didn't expect
it's like with Kentucky. Stoops. I mean, Stoops. People, he's a fantastic coach for what he's doing at Kentucky, and then this season 4-8, and now people like Stoops is he on the hot seat.
Well, Jeffrey, I'm on the fire Stoops train now because it's 3 downward seasons in a row that have been underappreciated.
I didn't know that you were anti-Stoops too. That's fair.
We got one of the top. He's one of the top 10 paid coaches, and he's delivering a 4-8 result, 7-5 and 7-5 over the last 3 seasons. I mean, my goodness, it's not. And we're going all in terms of the NIL front. We're doing the best we can do, and everything's imploded. I mean, everything is.
The East help Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, kind of like the Big Ten West with a lot of those Wisconsins and Iowas having better records. I mean, like the year Kentucky went like 10-2 or whatever with Benny Snell. I mean, like if they weren't in the East and they were in the West, they're not going 10-2. It's just not.
Yeah, but we did beat Penn State that year, so I think that validated that season somewhat. But
yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, and also I think it would have been nice if we could have been more competitive in any of these games. If we didn't lose by a lot to a little, that would have been nice. I mean, can we at least play for a half? Can we not be down 14-0 after the first 2 possessions? That would be nice. I'd love to see that.
With Kentucky is that they folded down the stretch of the season. Like they beat Ole Miss and they almost beat Georgia, and all that happened earlier in the year, and then. By the end, I mean, that Louisville game, there was no fight. Like, granted, Kentucky wasn't going to make a bowl, but, like, really, that was bad. I mean, like, they quit. They quit.
Well, there's a culture problem I've heard about at Kentucky as well with that not being the first time players have quit on the team. I think there's a lot of rest and relaxation and Stoop getting comfortable within the program. But I want to bring Will. I'd like to hear Will speak about his team because he's actually expected to win this game for the first time in 30 years. So, it's real nice. And Will, what are we supposed to expect as just average college football fans? Are we supposed to expect Notre Dame's to crawl out from under their tunnels and under the rocks like anytime there's a blue blood conversation and they're just going to be all over the internet?
I mean, yeah. I mean, Notre Dame fans will get loud if they beat Georgia for sure. I mean, I think the Indiana won't really move the needle, but the Notre Dame fans will definitely come out if they beat Georgia. And I mean, I feel like they match up well against Georgia. Like Georgia doesn't do well against teams that are trying to run it down their throat, and that's absolutely what Jeremiah Love and Darian Price will try to do. But first things first, it's Indiana. Win the line of scrimmage, hopefully get up early and force Rourke to chuck it down the field, and hopefully the talented safeties, Xavier Watts, Don Schuler, or one of the corners, Jeremiah Love. Not Jeremiah Love, Christian Gray. Jordan Clark, one of those guys can make a pick, and that's the way for Notre Dame to win big. But
how's the special teams? I know the kicker was an issue the last year.
Kicker is still an issue. Kicker is still an issue. That's my fear. And if there's a close game, and Mitch Jeter's going to have to make a kick, I just don't think he's 100% better from his injury. Like he can make the extra points pretty well, but anything over like 35 yards, I'm sweating.
I got you. And do you think if Notre Dame wins this football game, do you think the curse will be over? Do you think this will be Marcus Freeman's best win? Do you think this will validate hiring Marcus Freeman as a head coach?
I mean, I just think the team culture is so much better with Marcus. There's the belief that they can win the big games now that just wasn't there with Kelly. I mean, and the recruiting rankings might not be that much better, but just if you watch the athletes, like they are faster than they were under Brian Kelly.
I got you, Will, and I'm happy for you because you're the what curse Mark said. It's the curse of Notre Dame choking in big games. That's I don't know if it's a curse because they lose by like 30 points. It feels like every time they step up on the field in either the ACC championship game, the BCS national championship game, and the Year 6 bowl, but it feels like they're not even competitive. And I think if you're all competitive, just competitive.
I mean, they're competitive in
Georgia,
both of the Ohio State games under Freeman.
That's true, but those aren't postseason games.
I mean,
so,
yeah.
And also,
Marcus has improved that postseason.
It also doesn't help that the biggest error, maybe in the history of Notre Dame football, occurred because he had 10 players on the field.
I know.
I mean, it would have been nice if that didn't occur. That way, they just out. Mm-hmm. Yes, Mark. The curse is that they're not good enough. That's the curse. The curse of not being good enough. That is the curse. But yeah, so I'm happy for you, Will. And Jeffrey, I know everybody's going to say that Indiana's fraudulent. Indiana didn't belong. And while to some extent I believe that's true, just be happy you made it here. Oh. Be happy you're in the playoffs. And everybody's going to retroactively look back at this season as a failure. I think this season's an absolute complete success, even if Indiana loses this game 100-0. So I'm hopeful that's the way most of the Indiana fan base takes it. Do you expect that to be the case?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the thing is yeah, I wouldn't say I've been like ridiculous on like backing Indiana, you know, and saying that they're going to do this, going to do that. I don't think I've done that, but at the same time, yes, like for the most part, like I think you've seen a couple of the Indiana shows on, you know, Indiana The Voice of College Football that I've done this season, Hoosiers Live, but most of the season, that's exactly what I've said. I've said that whatever happens, like when they were 5-0 and they were going into that Nebraska game, I'm just enjoying what they've done so far. This is great. Like, I'm just enjoying in every game. Like, I'm just like, if they blow it to Michigan State, if they blow it to Washington, if they blow it to whatever. Yeah. All season long, I've just been so just thrilled with this season because I never expected. I predicted them to go 7-5, and I thought I was too bullish. I thought I was way too high on Indiana. And turns out I was way too low. Everybody was way too low. But yeah, I mean, if Indiana loses this game by 3 scores, yeah, it is what it is. This was the best Indiana football season basically in history. I know you had the Rose Bowl seasons and all that. I get that, but they're so long ago. And they didn't matter for the grand scheme of the program. Like right after the 45, Rose Bowl, Bo McMillan left for the NFL and Indiana went back to being bad. And then the 67 one, that one really felt like a fluke because after that, they sucked. I mean, they literally the next season, they were horrible. So I don't know. This is different because Indiana is in the modern era of college football with money being the main driver of everything, which I don't like and do not agree with. It's always played a big role, but it's now played a bigger role than it ever has directly with NIL. And Indiana's competing. They're flat out competing. I mean, giving Cignetti $8 million a year. That's top 15 in the country for coaches. Giving their assistant coaches $11 million a year. They're retaining them all except one. Indiana is in the running for some already good-looking transfers. One of the best D-tackle transfers visiting Indiana today. I don't know how that visit went, but just some good stuff for IU that I never would have thought I would have seen in my life because I didn't think Indiana would ever commit to football, and it looks like they are. And even if next season Indiana goes 7-5, that's still a success. It shows you that they didn't fall back like Florida State. Like as long as Indiana doesn't fall back like Florida State and next season they make a bowl game, 6-6 even, that's still good enough. And if Indiana can just be a consistently winning program, they don't have to do this again. I hope they do. But even if they don't do this again under Cignetti, if he just has them being a winning program, this season jump-started it all. It never would have been possible if you didn't have this season. So I'm just excited that Indiana has come a long way from where they were in the complete dumpster fire, and I just hope that they continue to be solid in the future. It's been fantastic. So that's what I've loved about watching this season.
Right. Well, I'm worried about us in the perception is a TCU 2022 situation happening.
But that's what people are going to do. If they go back, if they go even 7-5 next year, people say, "Oh, it was TCU all over again." I mean, even if they go 9-3, they'll probably say it. I mean,
right. Well, it's important for you all to be competitive in this football game. At least show some resistance that you had a somewhat plausible path to win this game. Because that's what really hurt TCU is everybody had this bias, and even I had it, where TCU was an inferior team. They're going to get crushed. And then I just saw that validated, not only through the first and second quarter, but even with Georgia's second, third, and fourth string, it felt like Georgia was just significantly better. So everybody just wrote TCU off. And I'm worried Indiana could follow that same path if Notre Dame just has their backup quarterback in and then their third string in, and they're still winning, it's 38-14, 45-14. And just seeing those point totals climbs, and everybody's like, oh, well, they're just Indiana. They're irrelevant. It was nice to see them in, but, back in the wasteland they go.
I mean, I hope it doesn't happen. I'd love for them to make the playoffs again. It's just, it isn't likely. I mean, even looking at their schedule next year, they have at Oregon. They've got at Penn State. That's 2 losses. And, I mean, even Indiana at 10-2, even though Indiana had this season, does that even raise the perception of IU at all? I mean, it does, but it doesn't. People are still going to be like, well, Indiana went 10-2, lost their 2 big road games in the Big Ten. Whatever. They're not in the playoff. I mean, they barely got in now. They barely got in. Really, if you really think about it, they barely got in. Still even debating it on the day of the reveal. They were like, well, it came down to Indiana and SMU and Bama, and Indiana, they were in, but, it wasn't that significant like they were in, They were still trying to make it like, well, they were in, but it was close. It shouldn't have been close. I get it because the schedule was bad, but 11-1 Big Ten team. No. But the thing is, whatever happens though, I just hope that they don't completely fall back to irrelevancy, and that just means not going back to being 3-9, 4-8, 5-7. Just make bowl games, whatever. Even if they don't get back to the playoffs, I hope they do, but it's not realistic that will that will happen. But I mean. Mark says hopefully IU will schedule a legitimate non-conference game. They do have Notre Dame scheduled in like 2030. Indiana's schedule has Notre Dame on there. And I don't know if that will get canceled by then. I mean, it might. But it is on the schedule. But, yeah, I mean, like Mark said, Indiana can win this game. Yes, they can. I mean, absolutely they can. And somebody said earlier, too, that, oh, well, Georgia's beatable. They almost lost to – every team in college football this year has almost lost to a bad team. Everyone. Every team. Tennessee almost lost to Vandy. Oregon almost lost to Wisconsin. We do this all Georgia almost lost to several teams. Bama sucked. Lost 2 games. I mean, all of them have. Penn State almost lost to Minnesota. All these teams almost lost to bad teams. Boise State almost lost to Wyoming. All of them have almost lost to bad teams. Every one of them. The only one that didn't count Michigan being bad is Indiana. Indiana did almost lose to a bad team, but most people think Michigan's bad. It's just really hard to justify that when they beat Ohio State, but whatever. But like I'm saying, though, like every single one of these teams almost lost to a garbage team. Really bad. Every one of them. So they're all beatable.
I completely agree with that sentiment and attitude.
Well,
and
Mark is right about Minnesota not being a bad team. I love Mark. Mark's amazing because he always challenges me to use my head. Like my head, like I'm really thinking here. But you know what I'm saying though. Like Minnesota's not good. They're not really good. In the grand scheme of things, they're not solid at all. They're just okay. And yeah. Penn State beat them by 1 on the road. Yeah, it's on the road, but like I'm just saying though, like all these teams on the road at home have had a game. Ohio State almost lost to Nebraska at home. All these teams have done it, every one of them. Minnesota equal decent. So we'll go with every single team in college football in the college football playoff has almost lost to a bad or decent team. And guess what? Michigan's decent too. So Indiana as well, throw them in the mix. Indiana almost lost to a decent team. There you go. All of them. Every team has. Oregon, people said Oregon's unbeatable, right? Oregon beat Wisconsin by 3. So they've all done it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Challenging me to be more specific. Absolutely. Sometimes I'm a little loose with my wording, but you know what I mean. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Right. How bad do you think Notre Dame has to play in this game in order for Indiana to win? Because I think if Indiana plays their A+ game, I still think Notre Dame can win this game.
Probably C+.
I would say.
Okay, and because it's hard to compare that with their schedule, because let's be honest, Notre Dame's schedule has been a lot of cream puffs and a lot of cupcakes, a lot of mid to below average teams this year. So what does a C+ game look like to you?
The Louisville game.
I agree with that.
Extremely sloppy, yeah.
I think a lot of people are saying the NIU game is a perfect example of why Indiana can win this game. I'm taking it from a different approach. What are the odds Notre Dame has a performance that bad again? Like, when was the last time a team has had two performances that bad in one season that we know is this good of a football team?
I mean, I said Florida State, but they're different, I guess.
Right, but Notre Dame is a legit top 10 football team at worst. When's the last time a legit top 10 team would have two NIU level performances? Honestly, don't know.
I don't know.
So, in my opinion, if it was a team that hasn't had it, we could say, oh, be on the lookout for having that bad game, because it's hard to be consistent 16, 17 weeks in a row. In my opinion, it's almost better because and Notre Dame got it out of their system early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing you said too, Darrell, about cream puffs with Notre Dame. Notre Dame's strength of schedule is only 10 spots higher than Indiana. And the only reason is because of that A&M game. Both played bad schedule.
Yeah, I know a lot of Virginia's, Florida State's, Purdue's out there on their schedule.
I mean, literally, Notre Dame's strength of schedule is saved by Texas A&M. And Indiana's, to be fair, is saved by Ohio State. But Indiana didn't win the game. So, whatever. Like, Will's team has a win against something. Since, again, no one wants to say Michigan's anything. How different is Michigan and A&M? Like, there's no difference except A&M had better quarterback play. Michigan is the best decent team probably in college football because of the fact that they have talent everywhere. It's just they didn't have quarterback play. If they had a decent quarterback, they'd go 10-2 easily. Easily. No, it's like not even debatable. Any decent quarterback would have led Michigan to 10-2. Had tons of talent. I just and plus, Notre Dame beat A&M in week 1 too. That's another problem because that can go one or two ways. A&M had moments later on in the year where maybe they would have actually been able to beat Notre Dame, but then A&M would fall back to being garbage again. A&M had moments where they looked really good, but then they had bad games. So A&M and Michigan aren't that far apart is my point. I know Mark would probably disagree, but they're not that far apart. But then everything else, it's like, okay, well, Notre Dame beat USC, Indiana beat Washington and Nebraska. Okay. And then the rest of it's just terrible. Mm-hmm. The Aggies have a better record by 1 game, and the Aggies don't have a win over Ohio State. And I agree that Notre Dame went on the road. I agree that Notre Dame went on the road and Indiana was at home. I agree with that, Walter. I'm just saying that they're not that significantly different teams. I was backing up to Real's point that Notre Dame's schedule was crap, just like Indiana's. So if people want to say Indiana's schedule was crap, so was Notre Dame. That's all I'm saying. That is all I'm saying. Notre Dame's by far the better team, and I've said that all night. I've said that all night. So we're in agreement. What I'm saying is that both teams play bad schedules, and that is true.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't understand the comment above from Jay that says Indy's beaten 4 ranked teams. The only ranked team they've beaten currently is Army, who is 22 in the country, in my opinion,
it's
solely because of the
record. Fact that of when they beat them, they were ranked. Who cares? That doesn't matter. Louisville's not ranked anymore. Okay? They're not ranked anymore. Doesn't matter. That's a stupid metric. I think Louisville's decent, but they lost to freaking Stanford. I don't even know what happened with Louisville there, because if they don't lose to Stanford, they're ranked still. I don't know what happened with them in that game. Louisville's not a bad team. Obviously, that's a good win, but still, I don't know. Yeah, Notre Dame beat Georgia Tech in regulation, but Indiana beat Nebraska by 49 and Ohio State won by 4. We can do that all day too. I've said that about 1 billion times this season. Does that matter? Does that matter at all? I obviously not. I mean, the problem is that everybody wants to look like Walsh said. Indiana went to Ohio State and got manhandled. Bud. It's basically saying that I'm a moron. When I've said about 8 billion times that Indiana is way worse than Notre Dame. And yes, I know Indiana is a significantly less talented team. And yes, I know Indiana got beat pretty handily by Ohio State, but the score was a lot closer than it would indicate. And Indiana made a couple mistakes, and Ohio State a lot of penalties. I've said all these things. It's just nobody listens. That's the thing. Nobody listens. I've said all these things already. Indiana most likely is going to lose the game. I'm saying that there's the difference between Indiana and Notre Dame with their schedule and as teams is not as far as people want to say. Notre Dame is by far more talented, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be, I think, a close game. Doesn't mean that it will. Notre Dame could win by 30. I just think it's going to be close. I mean, Notre Dame has not done all the things to be that impressive. They don't play teams. They just don't. They're not in a conference. I respect that. But their strength of schedule stinks, just like Indiana's does. It stinks. And that's why they're ranked 7th when they should have been 5th. I mean, there you go. I mean, that's just facts. Absolute facts.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jeffrey. And to me, it's almost inarguable. But, Will, do you think with the playoffs the way it is, do you think eventually Notre Dame's going to join the Big Ten? Because I think they should.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, maybe try. I mean, I wasn't trying to trash Michigan, but I felt like Ryan Day gave that game away to Michigan more than Michigan won it. But Michigan fans should still feel like they won it. But I mean, maybe eventually. But if they switch it to if the NCAA loses control, maybe eventually Notre Dame will have to join. But I mean, right now it's not in Notre Dame's best interest to join because if they can be independent, make a lot of money, fans will go to the games and buy the merch.
The issue is that the Big Ten media rights deal is becoming so valuable that Notre Dame's NBC deal is starting to become a little bit less big. You know what I'm saying? Like at one point, their deal was so massive that in comparison to the conferences, it wasn't as big. It wasn't as worthy for Notre Dame to consider. Joining a conference. I respect Notre Dame wanting to be independent, and I know why they want to be independent, and I'm not going to say it right here. We're not talking about, all the behind the scenes, Notre Dame program stuff. That's not the point of the show, but we know why Notre Dame doesn't want to join a conference. I understand it and I respect it, but they might eventually basically be forced to. And I think that's a little bit sad. I think Notre Dame should be able to stay independent if they want to stay independent. But if eventually there's a media rights deal in the Big Ten where every team's making $150 million or whatever, and then Notre Dame's making $75 million a year, then it just isn't. It's just not. It's not going to be really beneficial for Notre Dame to stay independent, but we're not at that point yet. So for now, I agree with you, Will, that Notre Dame it makes sense, but eventually they're going to force the hand.
Well, anyway, guys, I've been on here probably for way too long. It's been fun talking to you. It's fun. Sorry, Jeffrey, if I got you upset earlier. I didn't mean to rile you up that much.
No, you're good. Absolutely. I love the conversation. I mean, that's what the voice of college football is for. Mark's community is the best for that reason. I mean, he loves debating and all that kind of stuff, and he's the best at it. And I just you come on and I have friendly debate. I was cool with it. It was absolutely awesome. So no problem, man.
Well, that's good to hear. I know some people, when they get passionate and heated about it, they take it as personal instead of attacking the ideas. So I'm happy. Well, man, I'm happy for you that you're in the position that you are. It's nice to see, the good thing about the playoffs is we're going to see teams that haven't won anything in a while expected to win things. And I'm happy Notre Dame's in that position. And if somehow Indiana pulls out the upset, I'll be happy for them as well. But, well, I know it's been a while. I know you had some heartbreakers. So I'm just really glad.
I'll see you, man. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, Real. Thanks for coming on. It was a blast talking to you.
Yeah. Well, do we want to wrap it up?
It's up to you, man.
I gotta go to bed, man.
Yeah, me too.
thanks everyone for coming on. I love that Xavier Watts song that Jay did. That was fun. I think it was Jay. Yeah, I mean, just a quick thing. The chat was saying, I think Mike Mayock and I don't know, man. I miss Mike Mayock and Tom Hammond doing Notre Dame games, man. I mean, I don't think Dan Hicks is
you're
bad.
good, Walt. Sorry to interrupt, Will. You're good, Walter. A lot of people online when they say Bud are being not nice. That's all I know. I'm okay with it. The reason why, like, is I saw somebody else say something way meaner than that. Appreciate that. That's your opinion. I just like talking and having fun and debating online and with other people. I mean, Will is one of my best buddies that we've had for a long time, and all that kind of stuff. Me and Will love talking football all the time, and it's great to have this matchup. And I know Indiana's place in college football. I know that. And I know where Alabama's is, and I know where most other teams are. Those are my two favorite teams, Alabama and Indiana. But regardless of what happens, I just had a lot of fun doing the show. And you're good, Walter. No problem. Absolutely. Sorry, Will. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just excited for the game. And, yeah, I mean, I'll be down to do this next week, too.
Absolutely. Sure. That sounds great, man.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And I don't think anyone will look that differently, Jay Grizz. I think we need to beat Georgia. But we'll see.
Yep. Absolutely.
The Irish can do it.
Thanks for being here, everybody.